That meant that with a large number of corpses, as long as she could replenish her MP, Ling Er could summon an undead army. Back then, Ling could destroy large waves of monsters with a wave of her wings, turning them all into corpses. If Ling Er then turned them into skeleton soldiers, that sort of scene would be absolutely unbelievable. Killing a monster would not only give him EXP and items, but it would also become a minion. Killing a wave of monsters would result in him gaining a wave of minions. This was simply incredible. Corpses would be turned into skeleton soldiers, which would kill more creatures and create more corpses, thus increasing their numbers. In the end, he probably wouldn't even have to train anymore. He could casually kill a wave of monsters, allowing Ling Er to handle the rest while having a nice nap, while his EXP rose. Well, the prerequisite was that Ling Er was as obedient as Xiao Hui and Shi Ling. At least, for now, this dream wouldn't be able to become reality. Even if this skill was incredibly powerful, it was useless if Ling Er wasn't willing to listen to him. Ling Er's become even stronger. In order to celebrate Ling Er becoming stronger, here's 3 pretty dolls. Ling Chen grinned as he took out 3 new dolls and gave them to Ling Er. Seeing the dolls, Ling Er's eyes lit up and she quickly floated over, hugging the dolls in her arms. Over the course of time, Ling Chen had given Ling Er more than 100 different dolls, and apart from the days that he hadn't been online, he would give her at least 2 every day. This caused Ling Er to be happy all the time. Ling Er's favorite time of the day was when she saw Ling Chen, because that would mean she would receive dolls. Moreover, having over 100 dolls meant that Ling Er could use doll grenade more than 100 times. This girl is quite shocking, Qiyu sighed in admiration. Although her voice was soft, her surprise was apparent. She's definitely not simple. If I remember correctly, only the peak expert necromancers have this sort of ability, but have all sorts of restrictions. Even they can't compare to Ling Er. Qiyu, have you been able to deduce Ling Er's background from this? There shouldn't be too many people who can use this skill, right? Ling Chen asked. Indeed, this is enough for me to start making some guesses, Qiyu replied. However, if that really is her background, then it'll be contrary to what I had believed before. What is her background? Ling Chen immediately asked. The more he interacted with Ling Er, the more he wanted to know about her background. After all, she was too mysterious, even she didn't know where she came from, or what she was called. It's just a guess and there's nothing to support it. I don't want you to think too much about it, so I won't say for now. You'll definitely go to a certain place in future, and once you go there, we'll immediately know if I was right or not, Qiyu replied. Ling Chen could only give up. He was quite familiar with Qiyu now, although she called him Little Master, and pretended to be obedient and subservient. If she didn't want to tell him something, he wouldn't be able to coax it out of her no matter what. After Xiao Hui devoured the golden battle bear's corpse, he spat out an intermediate HP crystal that wasn't of much value to Ling Chen. The rewards from killing the golden battle bear were a few gold coins, a silver-grade shield and a pair of LV-35 golden battle boots. Golden battle boots, type, boots, grade, gold, equipment requirements, any profession about LV-35. A pair of luxurious boots made of gold. It glows with a golden light, as if it has been infused with some mysterious energy, and it is unexpectedly light. Stats: Defense plus 50, Agility plus 18, Evasion plus 20, Movement speed plus 10, reduces 20% of damage dealt to feet. The LV-35 golden battle boots had very nice stats, so Ling Chen immediately equipped them. Just wearing the boots made him feel quite prestigious. Ling Chen stopped training and rested on the grass. As soon as he closed his eyes, scenes and faces would appear in his mind, making it difficult for him to calm down. He raised his head and looked towards the northeast. He wondered how Meng Xian was doing. However, with how intelligent she was, he probably didn't need to worry about her. Ling Chen took out the moonlight treasure box, put it on his knees and gently opened it. Within the warm light, he saw that soul-capturing smile. Every day, he would open the moonlight treasure box countless times, because seeing the image of Roa that it contained made it feel like she hadn't departed from his side. Every time, he would stare for a long time, and was reluctant to close the moonlight treasure box. After a while, he squeezed his eyes shut, then closed the box as he shouted in his heart. Roa, wait for me. Ling Chen took out the communication device from his bag, and checked for any messages. Last time, because of the message from Su'er, he had found the Virgo orb. As such, he would check for messages from her every day. He knew that revealing the Heaven's secrets was difficult and dangerous, and that Su'er had just entered the Heaven's secret sect. As such, it would probably be a long time before Su'er could find another orb. Despite this, he couldn't help but check his messages every day. Turning on his communication device, Ling Chen immediately saw a text message from Su'er, causing him to become wild with joy. He immediately opened it. Big brother Ling Tian, congratulations on finding the thing you were looking for. You're now one step closer to your goal. Master said that big brother Ling Tian was able to find that thing with my help, which made me feel so blessed. Keep up your hard work. This time, I didn't listen to Master to wait a full month before using my powers again. I secretly used the Heaven's Secrets power, but I hope there won't be any negative side effects. I successfully saw one of the things big brother Ling Tian's looking for, but it's so far away. Just getting there is incredibly difficult. However, I believe that big brother Ling Tian will be able to do it. Here's the information I have. Within the narrow and long country to the east, the snowy valley under the cherry blossoms. Just like last time, Su'er had given Ling Chen 2 phrases. Last time, Ling Chen had been able to immediately figure out where the place was, past the eerie mountain ridge in the east, within a mysterious palace. However, within the narrow and long country to the east, the snow-white valley under the cherry blossoms just made him feel confused. Within the narrow and long country to the east, hang on, country? Could it be outside of the Forgotten Continent? Ling Chen snapped out of his thoughts, and immediately opened up the world map of Mystic Moon. Every player had access to this map, but apart from the main continents and some important islands, there was not much other information. Ling Chen looked to the right, or the east, of the Forgotten Continent, and saw a continent called the East Ocean Continent. This piece of land was right next to the Forgotten Continent, and was long and narrow, looking similar to an earthworm. I see. The second sentence, the snowy valley under the cherry blossoms. The cherry blossom was said to be Japan's national flower, while the East Ocean Continent was the continent that belonged to the Japanese server. A place within the East Ocean Continent with cherry blossoms, snow, and a valley. Now that he had a general sense of where he was going, Ling Chen stood up and asked Chiyu, why is an orb in another continent? Wasn't the lunar scourge created in the Forgotten Continent? Back then, it was the 3 moon goddesses who destroyed the lunar scourge. They controlled the fate and order of the Forgotten Continent, and decided to put one of the orbs on a different continent so that the lunar scourge could not be revived. Chiyu slowly replied, within my memory, the East Ocean Continent is filled with pirates. From what I can sense, Little Master doesn't seem to have a very favorable impression of them. Not a very favorable impression? Ling Chen coldly laughed and he smirked, calling them pirates would be a compliment. Many of those people have committed countless crimes, but don't admit it, and even tried to change history. They are unrepentant and live evil lives. They should have been crippled and fed to the fish a long time ago. If Su'er's information really indicates that an orb is there, I might as well leave them with something they'll never forget. Heh. Su'er's second peace message was very likely pointing him to the East Ocean Continent. In that case, the first thing he had to do was to find a way to cross the world boundary. Items that allowed one to bypass world boundaries were incredibly rare. In fact, they didn't even exist in most games. The world boundaries would usually be removed after the average player level hit LV80, when they had completed their third profession change. As such, although Ling Chen had a goal, wanting to cross a world boundary would be difficult, even for him. However, he was fortunate that less than half a month ago, he had personally seen an item that allowed people to cross world boundaries, the World Boundary Scroll. Good, it seemed that he had to take a trip back to the dwarves. If everything went well on Meng Xian's side of things, it wouldn't be difficult to obtain the World Boundary Scroll. Thinking to go back there, Ling Chen took out a spatial orb and pictured the dwarves' palace in his mind, gently crushed the spatial orb. A white light flashed, and the scene before his eyes rapidly changed. A system announcement sounded out, telling him that he had arrived at the dwarves' palace. That was just how magical and powerful the spatial orb was. No matter how far away he was, he could instantly arrive at any destination he had been to before. The dwarves' palace looked exactly the same as when he had left. It was quite peaceful, and Ling Chen immediately saw the scroll lying in the middle display shelf at the center of the palace. It looked exactly like an old teleport scroll. Ling Tian? Its little brother Ling Tian. A delighted yell broke the silence, and Ling Chen turned around to see an excited elder Dita. "Eider Dita, long time no see," Ling Chen said as he smiled. He wondered why Dita was still here. Could it be that Meng Xian was unsuccessful? Elder Dita hurriedly jogged over, and looked at Ling Chen. "Little brother Ling Tian, you must have come back using the spatial orbs, right? Who would have thought that I would meet you here? I came here to have one last look at the palace before leaving. It seems that I made the right choice." "Before leaving? Have you already started to leave?" Ling Chen asked. Elder Dita immediately nodded, his face filled with excitement. "After preparing for a few days, with the teleportation channel, preparations have been completed. Today, our entire clan is leaving this place. Before leaving, we will take everything away. However, this palace was left behind by our ancestors, so we definitely can't move it. I spent a good half of my life guarding this place, so I wanted to say goodbye to it before leaving. Who would have thought that I would meet little brother Ling Tian here? My clan has received a new lease on life because of your kindness, and you are our clan's benefactor. My entire clan hopes to thank you for what you have done for us. The chief and other elders are waiting for me outside. I'm sure they'll be overjoyed to see you." It seemed that Ling Chen was unnecessarily worrying. Ling Chen smiled and shook his head, saying, "I didn't really do much. If you really want to thank me, just help that girl called Yun Meng Xian as much as possible. Today, I wanted to request for something that is very important to me." "Request? AI. What do you mean, request? You're my clan's benefactor, so giving you something would be our glory. No matter what it is, we'll give it to you. Even if we don't have it, we'll find a way to obtain it for you," Elder Dita confidently said. His gratitude towards Ling Chen was apparent. Moreover, the ancestors had said that they would need to follow the person who brought them out of this place, because he would bring them into a new age of glory. Ling Chen had no idea what sort of position he now occupied in every dwarf's heart. Since Elder Dita had said such words, Ling Chen did not hold back and directly said, "I need to go to the East Ocean continent, so, the World Boundary Scroll? No worries." Elder Dita immediately knew what he wanted, and beat his own chest as he agreed, surprising Ling Chen. Before, he had told Ling Chen that no one could take the 3 items the ancestors left behind. However, it seemed that that did not apply to Ling Chen anymore. Not only did he give them their freedom, but he also gifted the Underworld God Cannon Blueprint and the Handsome Pan to them, which were worth far more than the World Boundary Scroll. Ling Chen guessed that even if he asked for everything in this palace, they would gladly give them to him. "That's right, I need the World Boundary Scroll." Elder Dita went up and unhesitatingly opened the many locks, then carefully took the World Boundary Scroll out and gave it to Ling Chen, saying, "This World Boundary Scroll was created by our progenitor. Only our clan can make such things. We've kept it stored away safely, but it is useless to us. If it is of use to you, then that's simply wonderful. Although I made this decision on my own, I'm sure that Dillo, the entire clan, as well as our ancestors would be happy to give it to you. Ling Chen received the world boundary scroll and carefully put it away, silently rejoicing. If he hadn't found the dwarf clan and obtained this world boundary scroll, it would be impossible to reach the East Ocean continent until the world boundaries were removed. Who knew when that would have happened? Many thanks. Congratulations on your dwarf clan being able to leave here. Please greet Dwarf Chief Dillo and the other dwarves for me. Having obtained what he needed, Ling Chen took out a spatial orb. Wait, before Elder Dita could finish his sentence, Ling Chen had already disappeared in a white light. Ling Chen put all of his efforts into gathering the ingredients required to revive Shui Ruo. In order not to distract himself, he even said a formal farewell to Meng Xian and the other girls. As such, he naturally wouldn't meet Dillo and the others just yet. After arriving at the Azure Dragon City, he put some of the things he didn't immediately need into his storehouse, then went to the item shop and filled his bag up, leaving only 50 spaces empty. He didn't know if he would be able to buy potions and other items in the East Ocean continent, so he had to make sufficient preparations. After doing this, he took out the World Boundary Scroll. Its description said that it could be used twice, which meant that he could use it to come back to the Forgotten Continent. Northern region of the Fairy Forest with the teleportation channel, all 30,000 dwarves, male and female, elderly and young, had been transported. The area around them was filled with things they had brought from their homes, as well as many delicious food. There was fruit, meat, desserts. To them, these were all food of the legends. This food, which was countless times more delicious than flatbread, surrounded them like a small mountain. Even if they continuously ate, they wouldn't be able to finish all of it in days. The dwarves all hungrily devoured the food as tears poured out of their eyes. This was like a dream come true. No, even dreams couldn't be so wonderful. The ancestors didn't lie to us. The ancestors' 3 requirements were actually fulfilled by us. We are so blessed. As such, we get to see the rebirth of the dwarf clan. This is the first day of a new beginning for our clan. Look at this heavenly scenery, and smell this intoxicating air. This is a true heaven. And it'll be our home from now on. And not only is this new home lovely, but we also have our fairy friends who will be by our side and protect us. Dwarf Chief Dillo's yells became louder and louder, and more emotional. Everyone. Do you want this to be your new home? Do you want to eat this heavenly food every day? Do you want to repay our benefactor? Yes. Yes. The dwarves roared back. Then let us release all of our passion and power into this place. Let us use all of our talents and skills to create a new home for the fairies and for us. Yes. The dwarves' shouts rose into the sky, and fire burned in their eyes as their passions boiled over. Although I had high expectations, it looks like I've underestimated you. In the distance, Li Xiaoshui sighed in awe as she listened to the shouts. I'm glad that Xiaoshui's at ease now, Yunmeng Xian said as she smiled. At ease doesn't even come close to how I'm feeling, Li Xiaoshui said as she bit her lips, looked at the dwarves and said with a conflicted expression, Meng Xian, if the dwarves really are as the legends say, do you know how big this whole thing will be? Yunmeng Xian blinked. In main cities, they only sell white-grade equipment, and very occasionally, steel-grade equipment. However, in the dwarf city, they'll be selling silver and gold-grade equipment. While other places only sell elementary crystals, the dwarves will be selling intermediate and advanced crystals, or even better. In fact, equipment that can't be bought elsewhere, such as rings, necklaces, scarves, belts and lunar chains, can also be sold. Many of the things that hundreds of millions of players desire will only be found in this city. This is simply amazing and terrifying. The amount of money flowing into this city will be unbelievable. Moreover, This place is close to the fairy forest, and so the environment is beautiful and the air is clean and pure. If we build a residential district inside the city, we can sell the residences for large sums of money, and there'll be an incredibly high demand for them. Moreover, there's the fairy clan. You said that a single drop of dew from the fairy clan, after being diluted 10 times, can create potions that recover 500 HP or MP per second. This sort of recovery would make any player go crazy. With this sort of potion, they can challenge powerful monsters and bosses, allowing them to become even stronger. A player with this sort of potion will become far more powerful than other players at the same level with the same sort of equipment. If we sell these potions inside the city, we'll be able to reap massive profits with almost no costs. Even if we sell a drop for 100 gold coins, there'll still be countless players who want to buy it. Li Xiaoshui became more and more excited as she spoke. After all, the possibilities were simply incredible. She slowly breathed out as she said, "What I just said was just a small portion of what we could do. If the city is successfully built, we'll create a legend for ourselves. From how things seem, the construction of the city is going to go quite smoothly. No wonder you only asked to borrow $70 billion. With these 30,000 dwarves, you won't need to employ any blacksmiths or craftsmen. After all, with their talents and passion, no blacksmith or craftsman could compare to them." Li Xiaoshui's words didn't cause any changes to Yun Meng Xian's emotions. After all, she had already planned out everything for the new city, from its creation to its running. She smiled and replied, "We need to thank Xiaoshui for all of this. Without Xiaoshui's financial support, none of this would be possible." Meng Xian's being too humble, Li Xiaoshui shook her head, "I'm just a beneficiary. You asking me for help with this is my honor." Li Xiaoshui knew just how much she would be able to earn back from this if everything went well. "Our top priority is still keeping this all a secret though. If this is discovered by other players, then everything will go to waste. Although this place won't be discovered by players anytime soon, but as the average level of players climbs higher, this place will be inevitably found. As such, we need to follow through with this as soon as possible," Li Xiaoshui reminded. I understand," Yun Meng Xian replied as she slightly nodded. "Come to think about it, the one behind all of this, what about China's legend, Ling Tian? Why hasn't he appeared all this time? I've admired him for a long time." Li Xiaoshui looked at Meng Xian with a faint smile. "Ling Tian, he's..." Yun Meng Xian wasn't quite sure how to reply when a loud system announcement sounded out. In fact, it was a world announcement. World announcement. Ling Tian, the name that attracted countless gazes every time it appeared. It had been a while since he had fallen from the player level rankings, and his name had not been heard of for a long time. At this moment, when this name once again sounded in players' ears, it wasn't just the Chinese players who were shocked. Players worldwide committed this Chinese player's name to memory. Passed through a world boundary? East Ocean continent. This, Yun Feng was blown away, and almost couldn't believe his ears. Right now, players had barely walked out of the early stages of the game. It was impossible that world boundaries had been removed so early on, and everyone knew that it was impossible to damage world boundaries or to pass through them. No player had ever succeeded in getting past a world boundary before, so this news completely shocked every player. How did he do it? Xiao Qiufeng was also dumbfounded. "I have no idea," Yun Feng shook his head, bewildered, "but what I know is that things are about to get exciting in the East Ocean continent." "Did you hear that? Ling Tian actually passed through the world boundary and is in the East Ocean continent. Holy crap! He even got through a world boundary. Just how heaven-defying is he? No matter how you see it, that's so cool. The first person in the world to cross a world boundary. Entering the East Ocean continent by himself, this has never happened before. And my EXP bar just increased by 10%. The China region was once again sent into an uproar by Ling Tian. This time, everyone was much more excited than they had ever been before. What Ling Tian did not only affected himself, but everyone else from China. After all, everyone in China received fame and EXP, and every player in Japan lost fame and EXP. It was only 10% of their current EXP bars, but that applied for hundreds of millions of players. That affected the entire region's average level. Suddenly, the average player levels of the China region and Japan region were suddenly pulled apart by 20% of a level. Undoubtedly, the China region's players were all rejoicing. Who wouldn't be overjoyed after receiving so many benefits for free? On the other hand, the East Ocean continent was filled with curses and rage. All of the players there wanted to immediately find this Ling Tian and destroy him. He actually went to the East Ocean continent. Why did he go there? And how did he get past through the world boundary? This was the first time Long Tianyun had heard Ling Tian's name from a system announcement after that catastrophe at the Long family's residence. This caused him to feel extremely uncomfortable, as the memories of that night suddenly poured into his mind. During this period of time, he had commanded his people to continuously search for Ling Tian. However, whether it was in the real world or in the virtual world, they simply couldn't find any traces of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. However, his fame on the fame rankings continuously increased, which meant that Ling Tian was still alive and kicking. As such, Long Tianyun found it difficult to even eat and sleep. Young master, don't think too much about it. It doesn't matter how he got there, but him being in the East Ocean continent is a good thing for us. Zhang Yan smiled as he walked over, saying, just going there is tantamount to him for intruding into their territory, and he even caused them to lose fame and EXP. Moreover, he's all by himself. Now, all of the Japanese players will definitely harbor quite a lot of hatred towards him. Now that he's there, he will be hunted down by all of the Japanese players. No matter where he goes, there will be people after his life. He must be feeling quite proud of him at the moment, but we'll see how he looks when he's been killed over there. From how I see it, he won't be able to last even a day. If he's discovered as soon as he gets there, perhaps, he'll be back in a few minutes. Zhang Yan's words were quite pleasing to Long Tianyun, causing him to coldly laugh. Ling Tian, let's see how arrogant you can be by yourself in the East Ocean continent. He paused for a moment, before asking, have you received any information about Xiaoyu? Zhang Yan immediately replied, 3 days ago, someone saw her in the deepest region of the Great Valley. However, she immediately disappeared, and she hasn't been seen ever since. These days, her level has been rising incredibly quickly, and is now 3 levels higher than me. She's the highest level in all of Asia now. I see. Next time, when you receive any information about her, inform me immediately, Long Tianyun replied. Even now, he still had no idea why Feng Xiaoyu had acted the way she did, and neither did he know where she went. Just like Ling Chen, it was as if she had disappeared from the world. Japan? Why did he go to the Japan region? Li Xiaoxue asked in curiosity. I have no idea. Yunmeng Xian's beautiful face was also filled with surprise. Perhaps one of the things he's looking for is over there. Li Xiaoxue's lips curved upwards as she said in disappointment, if it's like that, I won't be able to see him in the near future. He's all by himself, but the entire continent is filled with enemies. However, I don't feel that he'll be in any danger. It's the Japanese players who should be worried. As she spoke, she looked at the incredibly excited dwarves and the fairies who were rushing over. Anyone who saw this scene would feel awe and reverence towards Ling Tian. After spending so much time with him, one can't help but believe in him more and more. He has something that just attracts everyone to him, Yunmeng Xian said as she smiled. Although she said this, there was a slight hint of worry in her expression. She also looked over and said, look, Xiaoxue, the fairy clan has also come. Greenwood led 2,000 fairies out of the fairy realm, and excitedly joined up with the dwarves. After looking at the fairies, Li Xiaoshui couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow!" No less than expected from what Meng Xian called the purest race. They're all incredibly handsome and beautiful. Of course. If Xiaoshui is interested in any of the males, just let them know. There are more males than females in the fairy clan, and with Xiaoshui's looks, any of them would be overjoyed to be with you, Yun Meng Xian said as she laughed. Don't joke around like that. Li Xiaoshui looked at Yun Meng Xian, unimpressed, before mischievously saying, but if it was that Ling Tian, I'd definitely be okay with it, hee. No way. Yun Meng Xian subconsciously replied. Ooh, why not? Could it be that Ling Tian already has someone? I wouldn't be surprised, such an impressive man is probably already surrounded by many beauties. That doesn't really matter though. After all, having many beauties around him is a sign of one's charm and power. If I really set my heart on a man, even there are many women around him, I would still be able to make him mine, Li Xiaoshui said as she smiled. Which man could resist Xiaoshui's charms? It's just that. Su Su has always secretly liked him, and Chi Chi is the same. So, and, what about Meng Xian? Do you like Ling Tian too? Li Xiaoshui suddenly asked with a big grin on her face. Yun Meng Xian froze, then slowly shook her head, but did not say anything. Yun Meng Xian's reaction caused a hint of curiosity to flash in Li Xiaoshui's eyes. She began to smile even wider. Could it be that Meng Xian thinks that Ling Tian isn't good enough for her? Well, I'm not surprised. After all, you even rejected that Long family's heir, so why would you be interested in an expert in a game? It's not like that, Yun Meng Xian shook her head as she replied, it's not that he's not good enough for me, but I'm not good enough for him. Li Xiaoshui stared in shock for a few moments before bursting into laughter. Whoa. So there's actually such a man who can make Meng Xian feel so inferior. This is quite interesting. I want to meet Ling Tian more and more now, maybe I'll fall in love at first sight. This famous and powerful Lulan queen was now acting like a teenager who had a crush on someone, which made Yun Meng Xian feel both speechless and amused. Although Li Xiaoshui was joking, but the growing interest in her eyes was quite real. However, for some reason, Yun Meng Xian hoped that Li Xiaoshui wouldn't meet Ling Tian anytime soon. East Ocean Continent. Ding, you have passed through the world boundary and entered the East Ocean Continent, and are currently to the west of the Sunrise City. Because your status is that of an intruder, killing players will not increase your crime points, and you will receive the same amount of EXP as killing monsters of the same level. You will not be prevented from fighting within cities, and Japanese region players will not be prevented from attacking you within cities either. However, attacking NPCs or destroying structures will still result in you being chased down and punished. If you die, you will be sent back to the Forgotten Continent. As the system announcement sounded out, his surroundings became clear. He was in a completely foreign place, and it was the first place he had arrived at within the East Ocean Continent. The East Ocean Continent had one royal city and two main cities. The royal city was called the Emperor City, and was situated in the center of the continent. The two main cities were respectively the Sunrise City in the north and the Sunset City in the south. Most Japanese players were in the Sunrise City, as they could only enter the royal city after reaching LV50. The place where Ling Chen had teleported to was west of the Sunrise City, about 5 kilometers from the western gate of the Sunrise City. The system announcement made it clear that as long as he didn't attack any NPCs or destroy any structures within the city, he would not be attacked by NPCs in the city. This was also for the Japanese players as well. However, he was free to fight players within the city. What made him even happier was that killing Japanese players would give him as much EXP as killing a monster of the same level. This situation was much better than he had expected. He looked around him and found that there was not a single player in sight. As such, he put on a set of ordinary-looking equipment, and started to walk towards the Sunrise City. But then again, this was to be expected. After all, as long as one didn't offend someone else, they wouldn't go out of their way to make life difficult for them. Furthermore, Ling Chen had hidden his name, and it was impossible to tell from one's equipment where they had come from. Apart from Ling Chen's name, appearance, and the rare equipment he had, it was impossible for any Japanese players to recognize him. As such, Ling Chen swaggered into the Sunrise City. None of the players he passed by had any clue that he was the intruder from China. Ever since the world announcement had sounded out, the Sunrise City had descended into chaos and disorder, with Japanese players cursing their hearts out. Not only did Ling Tian intrude into their continent, but even caused their fame and EXP to fall. This humiliation was something that they could not take. All players unite. Find him even if we have to search under every rock. We can't let him stay in our territory. Killing him would be letting him off easy. Capture him alive. Hang him on the city gates as a warning. Let the whole world know the consequences of offending us. I heard that the 3 great guilds have already started moving. I think they'll definitely fight over who gets to kill Ling Tian. Whoever kills this Ling Tian will have done our whole country a service, giving them much fame and reputation. With the 3 great guilds moving out, it'll be impossible for Ling Tian to survive, even if he has 100 pairs of wings. Offending us is something he'll regret for a lifetime. Wherever Ling Chen went, the topic of the discussions was always him. Ling Chen coldly laughed inwardly, and coldly looked at the Japanese players around him. They dressed similarly to the players in China, and all of them were absolutely furious, and radiated bloodlust. However, even when he reached the center of the city, not a single person recognized him. Ling Chen asked an NPC where the Sunrise City's marketplace was, and directly walked over there. Item shop, equipment shop, tailor shop, everything sold in those places were pretty much the same as what was being sold in the Azure Dragon City. The equipment names were different, but the stats were about the same. Potions and crystals were exactly the same as those that could be found in the Azure Dragon City. Ling Chen walked into a shop and casually sold tens of elementary strength crystals at a low price, while chatting with the old shop owner. He asked, "Uncle, I have a question. I want to visit a place with lots of cherry blossoms, so can you recommend some places to me?" After buying tens of crystals for a cheap price, the old shop owner was feeling quite happy. Usually, players didn't even have enough crystals for themselves, and those who did have extras would often sell them at high prices. This was the first time he had picked up such a good deal before. Hearing Ling Chen's question, he immediately smiled and replied, "Oh. You want to see cherry blossoms? Young man, you must be like me back then, filled with romance and passion. Cherry blossoms are the most beautiful flowers in the world. Just looking at them makes one feel like their soul is being purified. Some people even call it a soul flower." Hearing the name, cherry blossom, the 70 or 80-year-old grandpa blabbered on for a long time, and Ling Chen patiently listened to him. Finally, he politely reminded him, "Can you give some recommendations for where I can see the cherry blossoms?" "There are many places," the old shop owner replied. "There are probably hundreds of places in the East Ocean continent with cherry blossoms. There's the Kumayama Mountains, Fushar Mountains, Cloud Cherry Crossing, Rainbow Valley. The cherry blossoms at the places are all different. Young man, if you love the cherry blossoms as much as me, then you have to visit those places, otherwise you'll definitely regret it. Your mum loves cherry blossoms." Ling Chen pretended to be deep in thought, then asked his actual question. "It seems that uncle is very knowledgeable with regards to cherry blossoms. By the way, I heard that in the East Ocean continent, there's a place that is snowy all year round, and there are many cherry blossoms there. They should have bloomed by now. Uncle, do you know where that place is?" The old shop owner revealed an expression of confusion. "There's that sort of place? Cherry blossoms usually bloom during the start of spring. They like warm temperatures, but not cold or hot temperatures. If that place is snowy all year round, it should be very cold there. It shouldn't be possible for there to be cherry blossoms there. There isn't such a place. Ling Chen was shocked. He knew what this old shop owner said was true. However, the sentence in Suer's message, "The snowy gully under the cherry blossoms," was definitely describing a place with cherry blossoms, snow, mountains, and valleys. Wait! The old shop owner suddenly thought of something, and suddenly stood up from his chair as his old eyes stared at Ling Chen. "Young man, could you be talking about the Celestial Cherry Valley?" Celestial Cherry Valley? What sort of place is that? Ahem, uncle, I'm just a player who hasn't been in the East Ocean continent for very long, so there is much that I don't know, Ling Chen said earnestly. Seeing the old shop owner's reaction, Ling Chen was able to confirm that there was indeed such a place. Moreover, it had to be some sort of a special place, otherwise the old shop owner wouldn't have reacted like that. The old shop owner stared at Ling Chen, then sat down. That's not strange. Even the East Ocean continent's residents might not know of this place. The Celestial Cherry Valley is in the north of the East Ocean continent. It is extremely cold there, and it is covered by snow and ice throughout the whole year. Moreover, there are many cherry blossoms there, which are all snow-white. They bloom all year round, but do not wither in the cold. Only the Celestial Cherry Valley fits your descriptions. Bloom all year round but don't wither? How is that possible? Ling Chen asked in surprise. This time, the surprise wasn't fake. Every flower had a season for blooming, and from what he knew, cherry blossoms usually bloomed for a very short period of time. How was it possible that they bloomed all year round and in such a cold place? It's true, the old shop owner nodded, as an expression of worship appeared on his face. It's because the Celestial Cherry Valley's great cherry blossom god representative lives there. Her godly powers affect the cherry blossoms there, allowing them to not only bloom in the cold, but also not wither. Within the snow, there are always tens of thousands of cherry blossoms. Just imagining it makes my heart melt. Where is the Celestial Cherry Valley? I must go and have a look at such an amazing place. Ling Chen said emotionally. The old shop owner looked at him, but shook his head. Young man, that sort of beautiful scenery is something that we mortals do not deserve to see. The great cherry blossom god representative is an ambassador of the moon god clan. She is powerful, pure, beautiful, kind and noble, like a cherry blossom without blemish. The Celestial Cherry Valley is a holy place to us, and is not somewhere you can casually go. If anyone goes there and enrages the cherry blossom god representative, and is punished by her, that person will also be hated by countless residents of the East Ocean continent, and may even be exiled. Also, I heard that because of the influence from the cherry blossom god representative's godly powers, some spirits have spawned, which attack creatures that get close. As such, young man, no matter how much you love cherry blossoms, don't go near there. I know that as an otherworlder, even if you die, you will be revived. However, if you really do anger the cherry blossom god representative, the consequences will be unimaginable. Oh, I see, Ling Chen nodded as he committed the Celestial Cherry Valley to memory. After exiting the shop, Ling Chen went to the item shop and bought a map of the East Ocean continent. The map bought from the item shop was, of course, much less detailed than the one he had bought from Qian Gun Gun. Luckily, the Celestial Cherry Valley was on this map, and Ling Chen found it immediately. It was at the northernmost position of the East Ocean continent, and there were few other places of significance around it. Ling Chen estimated that the Sunrise City was about 400 or 500 kilometers away from the Celestial Cherry Valley. Even if everything went smoothly, it would take quite a bit of time to get there. Celestial Cherry Valley. I hope that's the place Suer's message was referring to. Otherwise, this is going to be a big waste of time. Ling Chen closed the map and immediately headed towards the north. At this moment, a loud announcement sounded out. Ding! Player Cruelty Ichinawa initiated region announcement. Cruelty Achinoa, officially issue out a battle invitation to Ling Chen, who has intruded into our East Ocean continent. The time of the battle will be 12 p.m., and the location will be the Sunrise City Central Square. We'll have a fair 1v1 battle with the honor of the East Ocean continent on the line. If China's number 1 player is just a coward, then don't bother coming, ha ha ha. Ling Chen immediately stopped walking, a cold smile forming on his face. The furious Japanese players searched around for Ling Chen for a long time, but couldn't even find a shadow of him. As such, they decided to force him out by issuing a challenge. Moreover, it was issued by one of their strongest pros. The region announcement was broadcast to every corner of the East Ocean continent, and it was soon spread to China, as well as the rest of the world. Players all over the world were infuriated. God damn. This place and style, you call this fair? Those Japanese scum are shameless, Shaw. Cruelty Achinoa is ranked 3rd on the player level rankings, and has represented Japan twice in the international mock battle. He's incredibly strong. However, he's lost to the Sword Emperor many times, so challenging Ling Chen would just be bringing shame upon himself. But he actually set the location at the Sunrise City Central Square. Is that face of his on his ass or something? While he was in the mountainous forest region, Yun Feng suddenly jumped up when he heard of this news, and he began to profusely curse. Are you frickin' kidding me? Can they be even more shameless? These guys are famous for their shamelessness, but I didn't think it would be to such a degree. A fair 1v1 battle? Go screw yourselves. Indeed, this is an extremely shameless trap. Xiao Qiufeng was also appalled. For the battle to be at such a place, they were evidently planning to trap Ling Chen. By stating that it was a fair 1v1 battle, and that he would be a coward if he didn't go, it was unlikely that he wouldn't go. Moreover, if he didn't show up, the Japanese players would be able to say that the Chinese players were all cowards. However, if he really did go, even if Ling Chen defeated Cruelty Achinoa, he would be surrounded by a profuse number of Japanese players. Most players were gathered in the Sunrise City Central Square, and any player could reach there using a teleport scroll. Even if the Japanese players all died, they would respawn there as well. As such, although Cool Achinoa issued out a battle invitation for a fair 1v1 battle, what about after that? If Cool Achinoa won, it would be a great humiliation for Chinese players, the 3rd-ranked Japanese player defeating the top-ranked Chinese player. If he lost, the battle would be over, but the surrounding players would be able to attack, and it would have nothing to do with Cool Achinoa's battle invitation. And if Ling Chen didn't go, the Japanese players would say that China's number 1 player, as well as the rest of the Chinese players, were spineless wimps. So, even though everyone knows it's a trap, he can't not go, Xiao Qiufeng sighed in frustration. Even if the Chinese players wanted to support him, they had no way of going over. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been in such a predicament. If this was in a place that was accessible to all players, the Chinese players would have been able to overwhelm the Japanese players with sheer numbers. Yun Feng couldn't deny what Xiao Qiufeng said. He worriedly asked, what should we do then? If Ling Chen really does go, he'll be completely screwed. The Japanese players are pretty much invincible there, and once they get into formation, even if he's 10 times as powerful, he'll still be doomed. It's possible that they already have many traps set up, waiting for him. Xiao Qiufeng sank into silence as he deeply sighed. Let's see what he decides. Incredibly shameless. Yunmeng Xian angrily cursed. Well, it's expected of them. Li Xiaoshui was surprisingly smiling. She looked at Yunmeng Xian's expression and said, after all, for him to go there by himself and cause all of the players there to be negatively affected, what else could they do? Meng Xian, based on your understanding of Ling Chen, do you think he'll go? Yunmeng Xian blinked, and said in a soft voice, he will definitely go, otherwise, he wouldn't be Ling Chen. This challenge from the third-ranked Japanese player was cursed at by almost all the Chinese players and attracted the attention of players worldwide. Of course, apart from China and Japan, all the other countries were grabbing popcorn. China's #1 expert had somehow entered into the East Ocean continent by himself, and was forced into a battle by a Japanese player. This wasn't something that happened every day. When Cruelty Ichinawa sent out the region announcement, it was already 10:30 a.m. Within minutes, multitudes of people had flooded into the Sunrise City Central Square. The location was set at the Sunrise City Central Square, as opposed to in the wilderness. Even an idiot could tell what they were planning. Only they could be this shameless. All of the players gathered at the Sunrise City Central Square were grinning maliciously and rubbing their hands together in glee. They didn't feel ashamed at all, but instead felt jubilant. The players in China were unable to calm down either. There were less and less people training. Instead, most people were discussing whether Ling Chen would show up or not. They all knew that if Ling Chen went, he was dead beyond a doubt. He was at an overwhelming disadvantage in terms of numbers, and there was even a revival point there. Even a god would not have been able to get out of there alive. However, they all secretly hoped that Ling Chen would go. Even if he died, they wouldn't be called cowards. At 11:45 a.m., Cruelty Ichinawa appeared at the Sunrise City Central Square. He was tall and well-built, and looked ferocious. There was a long scar on his face, and he carried a large golden machete on his shoulders. He looked incredibly impressive and majestic as he stood there with an aura befitting the third-ranked player in Japan. Countless Japanese players cheered when they saw him, causing the atmosphere to become quite lively. Many of the players were taking photos of the scene, and countless media outlets started to broadcast what was happening. The number of people spectating this battle far exceeded what anyone expected. After all, this was the first international battle since the opening of Mystic Moon. Moreover, it was between the third-ranked player in Japan and top-ranked player in China. As the time crept towards 12 p.m., the Sunrise City Central Square was crammed with people. Even a fly wouldn't have enough space to fly out. However, all of the clamoring had died down. The China region had also calmed down, and countless players were staring at the broadcast, nervously awaiting what was going to happen. They all hoped that Ling Chen would go, but also hoped that he wouldn't either. When there was just 1 minute left until 12 p.m., Ling Chen still hadn't appeared. There was no sign of him at all. Cruelty Ichinawa, who had been standing there for a long time, lost his patience. He looked around him before suddenly hefting the large machete around while coldly laughing and shouting, "Ling Chen. It seems like you really are a coward. China's #1 player, my ass. Looks like you were too scared of me, your granddaddy, and didn't even dare to come, ha ha ha. Ling Chen, hurry up and piss back to China. Don't lose too much face in our East Ocean continent, ha 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 ha." Cruelty Ichinawa's words caused the rest of the players to loudly jeer in response. The Sunrise City was instantly filled with mocking and sneering, while the spectating Chinese players could only stare and clench their fists, wishing that they could punch through the screen into the Japanese players' faces. However, there were some people who were still feeling completely calm, such as Ling Chen. "Heh, how interesting. Ling Chen, are you going to show up, or are you going to be a coward? Ha ha ha." Ling Chen laughed cheerfully, and he felt the happiest he had been in a long time. He hoped that Ling Chen wouldn't appear, because he would be termed a coward by the entire world, as well as be mocked by countless players. In fact, even many Chinese players would curse at him and insult him, calling his reputation to fall. If he did show up, even better. I'll watch how you die. I'll see just how pitiful you'll be. Even with a god protecting you, you'll be as good as dead. After all, every single player there is your enemy. To Ling Chen, both of these situations were ideal. He was so pleased that he would probably be able to smile while sleeping. The silent China region also exploded with noise, with countless players cursing back at the Japanese players. They simply couldn't bear with the Japanese players' shamelessness anymore. It was a pity that their cursing and anger couldn't be transmitted over to the East Ocean continent, but the Japanese players' mocking and jeering could be broadcasted to the forgotten continent. Cruelty Ichinawa coldly smiled. It seemed that Ling Chen wasn't coming. That wasn't surprising, though. If he came, it would be equivalent to committing suicide. No one wanted to die for nothing, even if it was the top-ranked player in China. However, even if they couldn't kill Ling Chen, they would be able to return the humiliation and anger they felt. Although it was Ling Chen being mocked, but it was as if they were slapping every Chinese player in the face. As for Cruelty Ichinawa, he was the one who had made all of this happen. Thinking this, he almost began to laugh heartily. At this moment, a cold voice sounded out from in front of him, "Huh, you're that eager to die? Alright, I'll grant your wish." Although there were masses of people squeezed in the Sunrise City Central Square, there was a space that was left empty in the center, approximately 50 meters in diameter. Cruelty Ichinawa was standing in the center of that area, meaning that the 25 meters around him was empty. However, this voice sounded extremely close, less than 5 meters away. Cruelty Ichinawa jumped backwards in shock, and hurriedly swung down with his machete. "Ling Chen! Get the hell out!" His shout sounded as loud as thunder, causing the surrounding players to fall silent. All eyes stared at him, wondering what had just happened. They knew that Cruelty Ichinawa had yelled out Ling Chen's name, but there was not a single person near him. The unexpected voice caused Cruelty Ichinawa to receive a great fright, and he almost began to break out in cold sweat. His eyes rapidly swept around his surroundings, but there was definitely no one around him. Instantly a word popped into his head. Concealment. However, he had never heard about Ling Chen having such an ability. Moreover, Ling Chen was evidently a warrior profession. Concealment was definitely something that he shouldn't have. As he was still wrestling with his bewilderment, a person suddenly appeared 5 meters away. He was wearing earth-colored armor, and was releasing an oppressive aura. He had golden-colored boots on his feet, and wore a golden mask with spikes all over it on his face. Just this set of equipment caused countless players to gasp and hold their breath. Above his head, his name shone brightly, Ling Chen. The Sunrise City Central Square burst with noise, as every player there began to shout. Ling Chen had appeared, and his entrance was completely unexpected. He did not squeeze through the crowds of people, nor did he descend from the sky. He simply appeared right in front of Cruelty Ichinawa, causing countless players to stare in shock. What? What's going on? Could it be that Ling Chen was concealed this whole time? But I thought only assassins could conceal themselves, and they have to be over LV50 and have completed their second profession change. Ling Chen's definitely a warrior profession, so how can he conceal himself? Yun Feng said in disbelief as he stared at the screen. It seems that he had been hiding in the crowd for a long time, and only just changed his equipment and came out, Xiao Qiu Feng said in a low voice. It was just his entrance, but the arrogance of the Japanese players had been diminished by quite a bit. The Chinese players all cheered when Ling Chen appeared. Although Ling Chen was now in a very dangerous situation, he had at least protected the Chinese players' dignity. Cheers filled every corner of the China region. Ling Chen. It's Ling Chen. Good on you, Ling Chen. Destroy that Cruelty Ichinawa. Even if you die, you need to go down with glory. Ling Chen, do your best. Even if you die, you need to drag down at least 100 of them with you. Show these scum the strength of a Chinese player. After suppressing all of their fury and worry, the Chinese players burst out with happiness upon seeing Ling Chen, and they all shouted words of encouragement. After all, this battle concerned the dignity and honor of all of China. Ling Chen was not any ordinary player, he was the publicly acknowledged #1 player, so he was qualified to represent all of China. Countless eyes stared at what was happening in the Sunrise City Central Square. The Japanese players became quite lively as well. Forcing Ling Chen out was the aim of this whole event. Seeing Ling Chen, who was 5 meters away from Cruelty Ichinowa, they all coldly smiled. It didn't matter what the outcome of their duel was, and even if Cruelty Ichinowa lost, it was fine. After all, he was only the third-ranked player in Japan while facing off against the #1 player in China. To them, Ling Chen was already a dead man. Hee. Cruelty Ichinowa planted his machete in the ground as he maliciously chuckled, "You're China's Ling Chen? Not bad, not bad, it seems that you're not a coward, but this is so funny." Cruelty Ichinowa raised up his large golden machete as he looked at Ling Chen and coldly smiled, as if everything was in his grasp, "Daring to come to our East Ocean continent, you're either incredibly arrogant or terribly stupid. Forget it, since you've come, and it's time, let's start. I'm Cruelty Ichinowa, an ordinary player in Japan. Today, I've come to experience the power of China's #1 expert. Go Cruelty Ichinowa. Kill him out of the East Ocean continent. Who cares if he's China's #1 player? He's nothing to us Japanese players. Destroy him, Cruelty Ichinowa." The Japanese players all started to mock and jeer. After all, this was their territory, and Ling Chen was by himself. He had no backup, so they could act as they wanted to. Facing off against the extremely arrogant Cruelty Ichinowa, the silent Ling Chen finally responded. He looked up and pointed at Cruelty Ichinowa while slowly saying, "You think you're qualified to fight me?" The condescension in Ling Chen's words was apparent. Moreover, those words did not sound fake or forced at all. It was as if to Ling Chen, he was not facing off against a Japanese expert, but rather, an insignificant ant. Cruelty Ichinowa's face darkened. He was the third-ranked player in all of Japan, and had represented Japan twice in international mock battles. In Japan, almost everyone knew his name and everyone who came across him treated him with the utmost respect. He had never been spoken to in such a way, and this was in front of players from all around the world. 10,000 screw yous sounded out in Cruelty Ichinowa's mind, and he almost exploded from anger. He swung his machete, and his expression became even more ferocious and savage. "Ling Chen. You think you're so great just because you're the top player in China? Ha ha ha, in my eyes, the top player in China is just a joke. If I want to kill you, it'd be even easier than stepping on an ant." Hearing these arrogant words from Cruelty Ichinowa, countless Japanese players cheered. Cruelty Ichinowa's words were arrogant, but not without basis. Cruelty Ichinowa had lost pitifully against the Sword Emperor twice in the international mock battles, and the Sword Emperor was easily beaten by Ling Chen. It would be almost impossible for Cruelty Ichinowa to defeat Ling Chen. However, he was not by himself. Behind him was the 5th largest guild, the Cruelty Party. Under Cruelty Ichinowa's leadership over the years, it now had over 200,000 guild members. If he ordered it, they could drown Ling Chen with their spit alone. Even if Ling Chen was powerful, he was powerless against masses of enemies. Go and die. Cruelty Ichinowa raised his weapon and dashed towards Ling Chen. The large golden machete flashed with a golden light, and surprisingly became longer. An oppressive aura swept out from it, and even from tens of meters away, the surrounding players could feel the sharp waves the machete had sent out. Japan's third-ranked player was not to be underestimated. Facing such a vicious attack, Ling Chen did not retreat at all, and neither did he take out his weapons. He simply looked at Cruelty Ichinowa with a look of amusement, as his eyes shone with a mysterious light. Cruelty Ichinowa's attack caused the surrounding players to shout with excitement. Although he used a heavy weapon, his body was as fast as lightning, and he crossed the 5 meters of distance between them in an instant. The machete descended toward Ling Chen at such a speed that normal players wouldn't be able to react at all. At this moment, Cruelty Ichinawa suddenly froze, and the golden machete stopped in the air, as if he had crashed into an invisible wall. At the same time, Cruelty Ichinawa's ferocious expression disappeared, replaced with one of fear. Even his entire body and the machete in his hands began to tremble. His eyes widened, and stared with extreme fear, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in the world. "Ho! Why did you stop? Weren't you going to kill me? Come, attack me," Ling Chen said as he grinned. He took a small step forwards with his hands behind his back. Just this single small step caused Cruelty Ichinawa to scream out in fear and stumble backwards. He was so eager to get away from Ling Chen that he lost his balance and fell on his bottom, and his machete fell to the ground with a clang. So scared that he couldn't even get up, Cruelty Ichinawa didn't even bother to pick up the machete which he had viewed to be as important as his life. He did his best to crawl away as he babbled, "No, stay away, please, don't come over here." The surrounding players fell silent, and all of them stared in shock. Ling Chen took another step forwards as he continued to say in a mocking voice, "Ho! What's going on? You were so imposing just then. So it turns out you're just trash. I haven't even fought back yet, and you're already acting like this. I mean, you're the 3rd ranked player in Japan, so at least act like it. Are you trying to show the world your skills in acting like a dog?" While speaking, Ling Chen slowly walked forwards. Every time he stepped closer, Cruelty Ichinawa would howl in fear. Soon, a particularly striking and bitter smell assaulted the noses of everyone around them, and a puddle began to form underneath Cruelty Ichinawa. He had actually been scared to the point of wetting his pants. Ah! Cruelty Ichinawa's fear reached its peak and he screamed as he desperately scrambled away. He sped into the crowd behind him like a terrified dog, while taking that horrendous smell with him. Ha ha ha! Ling Chen began to wildly laugh as he clapped. Japan's 3rd-ranked expert, the head of Japan's 5th-largest guild, is quite impressive. My eyes have been opened, and my teeth have almost fallen out from laughing. Ha ha ha! Cruelty Ichinawa continued to yell out in fear in the distance, and Ling Tian's words were broadcasted to the entire world. After a long period of silence, all of the Chinese players burst into laughter, some of them even collapsing onto the ground from laughing too hard. The 3rd-ranked player in Japan had sent a battle invitation to Ling Tian, and had been scared into pissing his pants before they even started fighting. What splendid, comic and shocking display. All of the Japanese players' faces stiffened, as if they had just been forced to eat 10 kilograms of dung. The battle between Japan's 3rd-ranked player and China's top-ranked player should have been an epic battle to watch. However, before they even started fighting, Cruelty Ichinawa had been scared into wetting his pants, and had scrambled away like a scared dog. What's more, this was on his home soil, against a single Ling Tian. This was hundreds of times more hilarious than even the funniest movie in the world. Almost instantly, the Mystic Moon forums exploded into excitement. Extra! Extra! Japan's 3rd-ranked player, Cruelty Ichinawa, was scared into pissing himself by China's Ling Tian. He actually pissed himself. This is Japan's 3rd-ranked player. Wahaha! I'm gonna die from laughing. I'm really gonna die, as expected from Japan's 3rd-ranked player. He's quite skilled at pissing and running away. He really displayed Japan's might there. I'm never going to forget this in my life. Could this be one of Japan's ninja skills? So powerful. He instantly blinded countless eyes. Respect. Respect. You lowly peasants can't understand how great Japan's 3rd-ranked player is. That move he used at the end, it's one of the most powerful ninja skills, dog crawl. That posture and speed were simply marvelous. How profound. How elegant. Even a real dog would be impressed. He must be a professional. And that pissing skill. Look at the shape left on the ground, apparently it's a teleportation channel that can summon the legendary Ultraman. Cruelty Ichinowa's actions caused all of the Japanese players to feel incredibly ashamed. They simply couldn't say anything in response to the mocking of the Chinese players on the forums. Was there anything more shameful and embarrassing than wetting oneself in public? Who could have thought that Cruelty Ichinowa, who was usually so proud and mighty, would act like this? All of the players at the Sunrise City Central Square stared, flabbergasted. All of them looked as if they had just eaten 10 kilograms of dung, and Ling Chen's words were like savage slaps on their faces. It wouldn't have mattered as much if Cruelty Ichinowa was just a normal player. However, he was Japan's third-ranked player. He was someone who was famous all around the world, and had even challenged Ling Chen on behalf of all of Japan. What was even worse was that this was being broadcasted all around the world, and countless people were currently spectating what was happening. Japan's shame had been shown to the whole world. It must be because Ling Chen bribed Cruelty Ichinowa. Why else would he do such a thing? Ling Chen, you're so despicable. Cruelty Ichinowa is a weakling. He's not fit to represent Japan. Everyone, let's kill Ling Chen. Let him know what the consequences of offending Japan are. Feeling incredibly humiliated, the Japanese players started to vent their anger on Ling Chen. After yelling all sorts of excuses for what just happened, they started taking out their weapons as they glared at Ling Chen. After all, they had no other way to unleash the anger inside them. Naturally, their actions caused players around the world to look down on them even more. For so many people to surround a single person, at a location that was right next to their spawn and revival points, even if they killed Ling Chen, they would just bring more shame upon themselves. The Chinese players all started cursing the Japanese players, calling them shameless and contemptible. The Japanese players began to close in on Ling Chen, and the area around him began to shrink. Ling Chen's expression also darkened as he coldly smiled, watching the Japanese players come nearer. All of you, stop right now. Just as a battle was about to break out, a cold voice rang out. This voice sounded calm and serious, and was heard by every player despite how noisy it was. Immediately, every Japanese player stopped moving, and after looking in the direction from which the voice came, they all revealed expressions of delight. This voice, could it be, it's Yamazaki Junichi. Yamazaki Junichi's here. That's right, it's Yamazaki Junichi's voice. Heavens! I never thought that I'd be able to see him in person. This voice caused all of the Japanese players to become extremely emotional, and the crowd quickly parted to make way for this legendary person. The first thing Ling Chen saw was a strong, white horse. It was pure white, without any blemish at all. It had short, white fur, and was much taller and powerful-looking than normal horses. The look in its eyes gave off the air of a king. On the horse's back was a man in white clothes. He looked around 40 years old, was tall and well-built. From head to toe, from his helmet to his boots, all of his equipment was white. Even his skin looked exceptionally white. This caused his jet-black hair to look particularly striking. His eyes were calm and piercing, like a sword, and his gaze was extremely cold. When looking at Ling Chen, it seemed like he didn't even see Ling Chen as human, but as a corpse. Seeing this man, Ling Chen slightly frowned, and a name appeared in his mind. Yamazaki Junichi, Japan's Blade Emperor. He was publicly acknowledged all around the world to be Japan's #1 expert. In the virtual world, he was just as famous and respected as the Sword Emperor. His entrance, and just one sentence from him, caused all of the berserk Japanese players to calm down. All of the players looked at him with an expression of worship and fervor, as if they had seen a god. It was almost as if they completely forgot about Ling Chen. Yamazaki Junichi held an extremely high position within the hearts of all Japanese players. Yamazaki Junichi was a legend in Japan. To the Japanese players, he was an undefeatable god. After taking first place at Japan's Martial Assembly 15 years ago, his #1 position had never been taken from him before. He had never been defeated, and anyone who challenged him simply brought shame upon themselves. In the recent international mock battles, Yamazaki Jinichi had always been the soul and leader of the Japanese people. Because of him, Japan had always been able to stay in the top 10 rankings, and sometimes even entered the top 5 rankings. As such, Yamazaki Jinichi was a hero to all Japanese people. No one could compare to him in Japan. His guild, Heavenly Blade, was a legendary guild to all Japanese players. Although they had less than 1,000 people, every single member was an expert among experts. To the Japanese people, to be able to join Heavenly Blade would be one of the most glorious events of their life. The Blade Emperor, Yamazaki Jinichi, always kept to himself. If he didn't want to be found, no one could find him, and he rarely appeared in public. When Ling Chen had first intruded into the East Ocean continent, the Japanese players thought of him first, but couldn't find him, and now, when they were being humiliated, he had appeared. His entrance caused the Japanese players to become so excited and emotional that they almost shed tears. Blade Emperor. Blade Emperor. Lord Blade Emperor. Thank goodness you're here. Kill Ling Tian. Only you can do it. Ling Tian, prepare to die. No one can defeat our Blade Emperor. The Blade Emperor's appearance caused the Japanese players feel like they went from hell into heaven, and they all excitedly shouted out. Ling Chen looked at Yamazaki Jinichi for half a second, before looking away. Our glorious Japan never does anything as humiliating as bullying people with numbers, Yamazaki Jinichi said. All of the Japanese players immediately fell silent as they fervently listened to his words. Yamazaki Jinichi's expression was cold, and his voice sounded even colder, as if he had walked out from an icy cave. He continued, Cruelty Ichinowa was a scoundrel and a humiliation to the Japanese people, so please forget about him. Ling Tian, please have a fair 1v1 battle with me. Shing. A 2-meter-long dado, which was white as snow, slashed through the air as Yamazaki Jinichi held it above his head. Ling Chen couldn't help but laugh at Yamazaki Jinichi's words, ho. So Japan's third-ranked expert is just a scoundrel and a humiliation to the Japanese people. Doesn't that mean apart from the second and top-ranked experts, all of the other Japanese players are scoundrels and a humiliation to the Japanese people as well? Ling Chen's words caused players all around the world to burst out laughing. Yamazaki Jinichi's eyes flashed in cold fury. He had wanted to belittle Cruelty Ichinowa in order to reduce the humiliation that he had brought. Who would have thought that Ling Chen would have turned his words against him, using them to humiliate the Japanese players even more? Yamazaki Jinichi jumped down from his horse, and a white tiger that was twice as tall as a person appeared behind him, causing the surrounding players to gasp. Yamazaki Jinichi coldly replied, Ling Tian, let's stop wasting words. Call out your pets and show me your strength. The tone Yamazaki Jinichi used was that of an expert talking down to a weakling. Ling Chen felt even more amused. He tapped his chin and he looked up and down Yamazaki Jinichi, saying, Pets? Hm. I have quite a few, but I don't have a battle pet right now. Hm, you look quite strong, so, how about you be my battle pet? Ling Chen's words caused the players to splutter. Ling Tian wanted Japan's #1 expert, an undefeatable war god, to become his pet? These arrogant, condescending and unreserved words could only be spoken by Ling Tian. This was even more offensive than if he had just said, go f*ck yourself. After all, Yamazaki Jinichi was the top player in Japan. Ling Chen saying these words wasn't just offending him, but the entirety of Japan as well. As such, the Japanese players all flew into a fit of rage and started to curse back at him. They would rather him humiliate them than humiliate their pride and joy. Ling Tian. Take back what you said, or we'll never forgive you. You dared to humiliate our Blade Emperor. You'll pay for what you just said. Bastard. Lord Blade Emperor. Don't show any mercy. Be as cruel as you can in killing him. Let him regret even existing. Ling Chen. Who do you think you are? You're not even qualified to humiliate our Blade Emperor like that. Countless people yelled at Ling Chen, their voices thundering to the heavens. Yamazaki Jinichi didn't say anything, but his face had become beet red. He had long since become used to being worshipped and revered, and had never been humiliated like this before. Indeed, no one even dared to speak to him like this. The angrily speaking voices caused Ling Chen's ears to ring, but his expression did not change, and he did not even bother to look at those players. He flicked his wrist, as he lazily said, "What are you all yelling about? Do you people know who I am? I'm from the glorious China, and I'm the top player over there. I'm taking the initiative to take your little Blade Emperor as my pet because I think he's pretty good. I'm sure your little Blade Emperor is overjoyed right now, and wants to immediately become my pet, right? Yamazaki Jinichi?" Ling Chen was evidently trying to fan the flames with his words, causing the Japanese players' anger to rise to the sky. They began to shout and curse even louder, and the Chinese players started to laugh even harder and more cheerfully. Of course, to them, Ling Chen was just saying these words to humiliate the Japanese people and anger them to death. Ling Chen completely ignored the yells around him, and once again looked at Yamazaki Jinichi's body as a strange light flashed in his eyes. He stretched out his pinky and hooked it towards Yamazaki Jinichi, saying, "Yamazaki Jinichi, ignore those yells of jealousy. If you want to be my pet, then crawl around like a sheep and do a few bleats. If I think it's good, I might just be compassionate and take you as my pet." The Japanese players almost exploded in anger, and clenched their fists tightly. They were sure that even with Yamazaki Jinichi's temperance, he would also be furious. He was definitely going to kill Ling Chen in one blow. Yamazaki Jinichi suddenly moved. Everyone expected the dado to slash towards Ling Chen, starting the battle between Japan and China's #1 players. However, all they heard was a clang as Yamazaki Jinichi's dado fell to the ground. Everyone stared in shock, wondering why Yamazaki Jinichi would drop his weapon. Could it be that he was so excited to fight, that he was going to take out a stronger weapon? A new weapon did not appear, and Yamazaki Jinichi's eyes became innocent and harmless, then gentle. He raised his head and fell to the ground on his hands and knees, just like a sheep. The Sunrise City Central Square became silent, and all of the Japanese players, as well as players spectating from all around the world stared, dumbfounded. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Ba, Yamazaki Jinichi stretched out his neck and bleated towards Ling Chen. The first bleat sounded a bit awkward, the second sounded more realistic, and the third one sounded just like a real sheep's bleat. Yamazaki Jinichi's posture shocked everyone, but the bleats almost made everyone faint. What is going on? Yamazaki Jinichi is, Yunfeng was staring at the screen as he stuttered. His brain was completely overwhelmed with what was happening. Crawl around like a sheep and do a few bleats, wasn't this just Ling Chen humiliating Yamazaki Jinichi? Why the hell was Yamazaki Jinichi doing this? The #1 expert in Japan, the world-renowned Blade Emperor, was actually acting like this. He really was crawling around like a sheep and bleating. Xiao Qiufeng's eyes were also incredibly wide, and his mouth hung open. He couldn't utter a single word, and could only stare. Ha 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 ha. Ling Chen laughed. These Fengchen curses were way too savage. No matter if it was Cruelty Ichinawa who had been affected by the Scaredy cat curse, or Yamazaki Jinichi who was currently being affected by the I'm a sheep curse, it didn't matter how famous and respected they were in the past. After today, their names and reputation would be unrecoverable, and they would fall from being legends to laughingstocks. It was even worse than killing them 100 times, or even 1,000 times. No wonder why Xiao Fengchen said that even peerless experts fled from the Fengchen sect's successors, and that no one dared to offend the Fengchen sect. Indeed, if he was affected by this sort of curse, thinking that, Ling Chen couldn't help but shiver. It would be better to die than to face the consequences. Huh, not bad, not bad, even a sheep would mistake those bleats for another sheep, KJ, Ling Chen said as he applauded. He stretched out his right hand, which now had some grass in it as he waved it around. Come, come, Japan's Blade Emperor, Yamazaki Jinichi, since you really want to become my pet, then I'll accept you. Here, after you eat this, you can officially become my pet, Heihei. Seeing the grass, Yamazaki Jinichi's eyes lit up, and ran over to Ling Chen, or more accurately, he quickly crawled over. He cocked his head, and took the grass in his mouth, then began to chew it with a look of bliss on his face. After being affected by the "I'm a sheep" curse, one would wholeheartedly believe that they were a sheep. Perhaps they would even become enraged towards anyone who told them otherwise. To be a sheep, one had to walk like a sheep, speak like a sheep, as well as eat like a sheep, even if it meant eating grass. From when Yamazaki Jinichi knelt down, bleated and crawled over to eat grass, the Japanese players had all been watching in shock, unable to believe their eyes and ears. They felt as if there were thousands of flies buzzing in their heads, and that there were tens of thousands of dead flies in their throats. They felt extremely uncomfortable and disgusted. They simply couldn't believe and accept that their number one expert, someone who could place in the top 10 players in the entire world, would act like this. He was a legend and a hero to all of the Japanese people, and was also the guild master of the Heavenly Blade. And yet, he had followed Ling Tian's instructions to act like a sheep in front of the entire world, in order to become Ling Tian's pet. Yamazaki Jinichi wasn't just a normal Japanese player, he was the number one expert in Japan, a spiritual figure to all Japanese people. The awe and reverence held by the Japanese players towards him instantly vanished. The shame they felt was simply unimaginable. They felt that their honor and dignity had been completely and utterly trampled upon. Seeing Japan's third-ranked expert acting like a dog and top-ranked expert acting like a sheep, the Japanese players felt that all of their pride had instantly vanished. Japan was now a joke to the entire world. This was the biggest humiliation they had ever suffered. None of the Chinese players expected this to happen either. Apart from Ling Chen himself, no one would even dare to think that Yamazaki Jinichi would do such a thing. When they had finally realized what was happening, the Chinese players almost lost their minds laughing. Oh my goodness! Japan's Blade Emperor is actually willing to become Ling Tian's pet, that's the Blade Emperor. And he's even bleeding like a sheep and eating grass. Could it be that Ling Tian's charisma has already surpassed God level, that even the Blade Emperor is willing to become his pet? Ah! Everyone saw, right? Ah! Japan's Blade Emperor has already become Ling Tian's pet, goddamn. A pet. Japan's number one player is our China's number one player's pet, wahahaha. Holy crap. Am I going crazy, or is the whole world going crazy? My eyes. My eyes. I just had laser surgery done on my eyes, but I think I've gone blind. Ah! What a moving scene. In order to become Ling Tian's pet, Japan's Blade Emperor is willing to act like a sheep in order to express his sincerity to the entire world. His sincerity and earnestness moved Ling Tian, who decided to give him the glory of being his pet. Ah! I'm so moved that I'm about to cry. This story will definitely be passed down as a legend. The entire world will forever remember Yamazaki Jinichi's name. Go! Kill that Ling Tian. Ling Tian must die. The Japanese players felt like their heads were going to explode, and their eyes all turned completely red. Like a pack of despairing wolves, they charged at Ling Chen. This sort of humiliation caused them to lose all their rationality. Ling Chen glanced at the Japanese players charging over, and looked at Yamazaki Jinichi, who was still eating grass. After using the psychic flower that he had bought from Qian Gun Gun, his comprehension had risen to 17, meaning that all of his Feng Chen curses lasted for 17 seconds. Although it was not a long time, it definitely wasn't short either. The effects of the I'm a sheep curse were about to expire. Ho! Yamazaki Junichi, it looks like your Little Japan's players doesn't want you to become my pet. Oh well, having a barbarian as my pet wouldn't be very fun anyways. I'll let you return to your people. After speaking, Ling Chen kicked Yamazaki Junichi's butt, causing him to fly into the air. After flying a few meters, Japan's Blade Emperor crashed face first into the ground. However, he continued to bleat, causing the Japanese players to almost cough up blood. If this happened in the past, everyone would have fought to have the opportunity to help the Blade Emperor up. However, now, none of the Japanese players even wanted to get close. This Blade Emperor had been an invincible legend a few moments ago, but was now a pile of dung. His status as Japan's #1 player and Blade Emperor were now embarrassments to Japan. Ling Chen grinned, and silently marveled at the Feng Chen curses. After all, even if Ling Chen defeated the Blade Emperor, he would still be the Blade Emperor, as well as a legend to the Japanese people. Since Ling Tian had easily defeated the Sword Emperor, the Blade Emperor losing would not be a big deal. However, the Feng Chen curse lasted for less than 20 seconds, but was enough to completely destroy the Blade Emperor. This showed how powerful the Feng Chen curses were. The saying, "It's better to offend the Grim Reaper than to anger the Feng Chen sect," was not an exaggeration. Especially considering that even the moon goddesses had fallen victim to them, resulting in Xiao Feng Chen being thrown into the lunar sky hell. At this moment, the effects of the I'm a sheep curse ended. Of course, the Scaredy cat curse that had been used on Cruelty Ichinoa had also expired a long time ago, but he definitely didn't have the guts to show his face anymore. Perhaps he went to find a secluded place to cry and vent. He was quite lucky in the sense that he did not have to immediately face the aftermath of what just happened. Yamazaki Junichi had been clear-minded the entire time. For those 17 seconds, he clearly believed that he was a sheep, and now, he completely believed that he was a human. The humiliation and shame from what had just happened caused his entire body to shake, and his face twisted in anger. Yamazaki Junichi got up. He didn't even need to look around to know just how much the rest of the Japanese players despised and looked down on him. To the whole world, he, the Blade Emperor, was now just a laughingstock. Arg! Ling Tian, I'll kill you. No matter how much mental fortitude someone had, facing such humiliation, they simply wouldn't have been able to keep their sanity. Yamazaki Junichi's face was even more terrifying than a demon's, and he shrieked like a devil. He snatched up his dado from the ground, and madly rushed towards Ling Chen. Right now, his only desire was to make Ling Chen die as horribly as possible. A cold smile flashed on Ling Chen's face. After all, the Blade Emperor who had lost his rationality was no longer the Blade Emperor. Although he was charging over ferociously, he was full openings. Ling Chen did not even bother to move, and when he was 5 meters away, the Great Ravager and Twilight Spear appeared in Ling Chen's hands. Ding! Ling Chen disappeared, only leaving behind a ray of blinding light. All of the spectators felt their vision blur, and Ling Chen suddenly appeared behind Yamazaki Junichi. Yamazaki Junichi continued to charge forwards, but lost his balance and fell to the ground and remained there, unmoving. A damaged figure appeared above him, and gradually disappeared. -8186. Moment of elegance. Insta-kill. It was a true insta-kill. Haha, this is how strong your top player is? My eyes have been opened, your #1 player is so weak? Ling Chen mocked the Japanese players as he continued to grin. Everyone clearly saw that Japan's #1 expert had been taken down by China's #1 expert in just one move. The gap between them was simply too vast. For the Blade Emperor to defend his title as the top player in Japan for over 10 years, he was indeed an extraordinary player. However, he had lost control of his emotions, and had no battle sense left in him. Moreover, Ling Chen's moment of elegance was extremely fast and powerful. Even in his peak condition, the Blade Emperor couldn't have avoided it, much less in his current state. It was no wonder he was insta-killed. Having their top player insta-killed was yet another blow to the pride of the Japanese players. One didn't even have to think to imagine just how much the Chinese players would mock them over this. After enduring humiliation after humiliation, the Japanese players simply couldn't take it anymore. Only by crushing Ling Chen into dust could their rage be quelled. They didn't need anyone to give the command. The humiliation that they suffered completely destroyed their dignity and unleashed the savageness inside them. The Japanese players roared, and swarmed towards Ling Chen like a massive wave. Ah! Yunfeng jumped up to his feet. What he dreaded most was now happening. He gripped his hair with his hands as he exclaimed, "Crap! What should we do? They've got so many people, and the revival point is right next to them. Even a god wouldn't be able to survive." Xiao Qiufeng glanced at him and blandly replied, "It's no use even if you worry. Plus," he paused for a moment as he frowned, "look, Ling Chen seems calmer than anyone else right now. Perhaps he has a way to escape." On the screen, Ling Chen was still mockingly laughing at the Japanese players, and didn't seem nervous or worried at all. However, this didn't help Yunfeng calm down in the slightest, and he anxiously yelled, "Escape? How can he escape? The entire central square has been blocked off, and even a fly wouldn't be able to get out. How can he possibly escape? If it was you, escaping would be impossible." "However, he's Ling Chen." Xiao Qiufeng's eyes lit up with a faint sense of expectation. "Ling Chen, let me see how you defy fate today. If you can escape from this situation, your name will well and truly stand on equal ground with Eve's. If that happens, every player in the world will know the name Ling Chen, and China will skyrocket to a new position in the world. At that moment, you will become a spiritual figure in the Chinese virtual world. When it becomes known that Ling Chen is Ling Chen, even the Long family would not be able to do anything to you." Compared to the massive onslaught of Japanese players, Ling Chen looked like a single grain of sand within a vast sea. He observed his surroundings, looking at all the eyes filled with hatred, and smirked. An extremely blinding silver light shone out from the lunar scourge, mercilessly stabbing into the countless Japanese players' eyes. Howls filled the Sunrise City central square, and all of the players unconsciously squeezed their eyes shut. The feed that was being broadcast to other countries turned white, and the spectating players could only hear the miserable screams. The moon flare cast by the LV-30 Ling Chen now had a range of 60 meters. This area was filled with an intense silver light, making it so that no one except Ling Chen could see what was happening. "Don't panic. Don't let Ling Chen get away. Hurry and attack." It was obvious that this light was released by Ling Chen in order to blind everyone and use the opportunity to escape. All of the players in the crowd began to yell, but they were unable to open their eyes. They could only blindly swing their weapons around and randomly cast their abilities in the direction they thought that Ling Chen was in. Of course, because they were attacking so wildly, most of the Japanese players' attacks fell on other Japanese players, and the entire scene descended into utter chaos. Whoosh, the nightmarish light finally disappeared, and the Japanese players gradually opened their eyes. The screen that the spectating players were watching also returned to normal. Within the area that had been covered by the light, Japanese players' corpses lay strewn all over the ground. There were at least 100 of them. Beside them, the remaining Japanese players continued to attack, while dumbly staring at the corpses. Because the Japanese players were clustered so closely together, any player casually attacking would hit many other players. All of these Japanese players had been killed by their fellow countrymen. "Where's Ling Chen? Where did he go?" There were corpses everywhere, but not a single one of them belonged to Ling Chen. Ling Chen's equipment was quite eye-catching, but he was nowhere to be seen. "We have so many people surrounding him, so it's impossible for him to escape. He definitely changed his equipment and is hiding among us." The Japanese players felt as if they had been woken from a dream. Indeed, they had completely surrounded this entire region, so it would be impossible for Ling Chen to get away without being discovered. The only possibility was that Ling Chen had disguised himself and was hiding among the remaining players. However, the Japanese players gathered here had come from all over the place, and barely anyone recognized each other. It was almost impossible to determine who was who. Ling Chen was from a different country, and thus was not affected by the laws in the East Ocean continent. As long as he didn't attack any NPCs or destroy any structures, he would not be punished. Similarly, the Japanese players would not be punished for attacking him. However, these Japanese players had all attacked other Japanese players. As such, the offenders would be confined for 24 hours. However, these 24 hours only counted when the player was online, meaning that they had to be logged on, waiting in the jail for a total of 24 hours, before they were released. Of course, this could be avoided if they were willing to pay bail. However, the amount required for bail was quite hefty, and usually not affordable by a normal player. Many Japanese players were taken away by the city guards, while the rest of the players could only stare. The most pressing issue right now was, where was Ling Chen? Ling Chen had completely trampled upon Japan's honor. If he was allowed to escape, the Japanese players would never be able to raise their heads in front of Chinese players ever again, and would become eternal jokes to the rest of the world. Everyone show your names and take off your masks. Someone started shouting, and soon the entire crowd began to shout the same thing. Indeed, making everyone show their names and take off their masks would make it a lot easier to find Ling Chen. However, the prerequisite was that everyone was willing. Evidently, this was not the case. In the virtual world, the majority of players preferred to hide their names, and around half of all players wore masks. Protecting one's identity was something that was important to every player, and this was especially so for those who had some special circumstances. Even in this sort of situation, there were many players who were not willing to comply. Of course, the majority of players still revealed their names and took off their masks, which resulted in. He didn't take off his mask. His name is also still hidden, so he's probably Ling Chen. Oi! Why aren't you showing your name? Ah! You must be Ling Chen. Ling Chen's over here. There's someone over here who isn't showing his name. His figure looks extremely similar to Ling Chen's. Ling Chen's over here. Quickly surround him and don't let him get away. I found Ling Chen. This person refused to take off his mask and is hiding his name. Almost instantly, countless cries of "I found Ling Chen" and "Ling Chen's here" erupted around the Sunrise City Central Square. All of the players who were unwilling to reveal their names or show their faces were surrounded by other players. However, there were many of them. Which one was the real Ling Chen? Screw it. Let's kill all of these people who aren't showing their names or taking off their masks. Even if we kill innocent people, we can't let Ling Chen escape. This yell caused all of the Japanese players to become consumed with bloodlust and hatred. They charged at the Ling Chen's in front of them with their weapons in hand, without even giving them a chance to explain. Instantly, the Sunrise City Central Square once again erupted with sounds of fighting and screaming, and thousands of players were killed. It seemed that the Japanese players would rather kill 1,000 innocent players than to let Ling Chen get away, showing just how much they hated and feared Ling Chen. Countless bodies now filled the Sunrise City Central Square. Although the players almost immediately respawned at the revival point, they had to suffer the consequences of losing a level. The city guards that had just departed once again descended from the sky and took away the players who had attacked or killed other players, sending them to the Sunrise City's prison. However, all of the players who had died were all Japanese players. Ling Chen was still nowhere to be seen. It definitely wouldn't be so easy to find and kill Ling Chen. Don't panic. Ling Chen couldn't have gotten very far. He's definitely hiding in the crowd. Everyone, keep looking for people who are hiding their names and are wearing masks. Immediately attack once you've found anyone. No matter how great the price, we must find him. If you don't want to die for nothing, reveal your names. Otherwise, don't blame us for killing you. The person who was shouting was called Yamamoto Michio. He wasn't ranked among the top experts in Japan, but his fame was second to only Yamazaki Junichi's. This was because he was the leader of the largest guild in Japan, Unsetting Sun. He had immense fame and power in the Japanese virtual world. Ling Tian's disappearance caused the Sunrise City to fall into chaos, and all of the Japanese players felt completely furious and humiliated. Everyone warily looked at the players around themselves, and would immediately attack anyone who had their name hidden or face covered. And yet, Ling Tian still had not been found, whereas countless Japanese players had died or been taken away by the city guards. All of the Japanese players knew that this would be the outcome, but they had no other choice. Since the situation had already escalated to such a level, they could only do their best to find Ling Tian in order to crush him into dust. Everything was being broadcast by the media all around the world, and players everywhere were watching in amusement. What could be more hilarious than this scene? The Chinese players all felt incredibly pleased and relieved, but were still a bit worried that Ling Tian would be found. With such a large encirclement, it was impossible for Ling Tian to escape very far away. If he tried to forcefully break out, he would be discovered immediately. Like the Japanese players said, he was probably still at the center of the Sunrise City Central Square. If he was found, he would probably be buried alive by all of the people there. Of course, there was a possibility that no one had even considered. Was Ling Tian even in the game anymore? Ling Chen lay on the sofa, leisurely snacking on some pumpkin seeds. He smirked as he looked at the television screen, and almost laughed out loud. That's right. While the Japanese players were making hefty sacrifices to find and kill him, he wasn't even in the game. During the 4 seconds of moon flare, he had quickly lost the aggro of the Japanese players and logged off. After he logged off, everything played out just as he had expected. Everything he had done was to make the Japanese players as furious as possible, so that they would act like this after discovering that he was gone. They had started a hunt for Ling Tian, and killed anyone who did not show their names or hid their faces. The more they killed, the less they wanted to give up. They had no idea that they were just poor little clowns who were trying to find Ling Tian while he was relaxing and watching them do so in the safety of his own home. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed. 15 minutes passed. The number of Japanese players who had been killed continuously increased, and more than 10,000 players had been taken away by the city guards. Today was the busiest day of the Sunrise City's prison. Ling Tian, however, had still not been found, and the Japanese players started to lose hope. They started to realize that perhaps Ling Tian wasn't even there anymore. Even so, they simply couldn't accept this. Otherwise, everything that they had just been through would have been for naught, and they would suffer an even greater humiliation. Yamamoto Michio felt numb, and started to realize that it was likely Ling Tian was gone. Otherwise, it was unlikely that they couldn't find him after such a long time. If he really was gone, they had killed so many innocent people for nothing, and many players had been sent to the prison for nothing, whereas Ling Tian and the rest of the world had been watching them in amusement. Yamamoto Michio's fury and indignation reached their peaks, causing him to roar, "Ling Tian! Get the hell out if you're a man! Are you Chinese people all cowards? Ling Tian! Get out here! Get the hell out!" Yamamoto Michio shouted out 3 times, but didn't receive any reply. His face twisted and he flicked his wrist, shouting, "Let's go!" He could pretty much confirm that Ling Tian was no longer there, but couldn't bring himself to say those words. Otherwise, that would just add to the humiliation that they had already suffered. After Yamamoto Michio yelled out, all of the Unsetting Sun players gathered together and prepared to leave with him. This was also a signal to the other Japanese players to give up and leave as well. At this moment, Ling Chen suddenly got up from the sofa and slowly trudged towards the bedroom. The Japanese players felt more and more sullen and deflated as time dragged on. Soon, most of their anger had been reduced by how depressed they were feeling, and Yamamoto Michio telling everyone to leave took a weight off their minds. However, just as they were about to leave, Ling Chen logged on. Unfortunately, no one saw Ling Chen when he logged on, because as soon as he appeared, he instantly activated Moon Flare, causing the Japanese players to once again experience the agony of being blinded. The Japanese players screamed in pain and fear as Ling Chen madly laughed. Ha ha ha. You idiots, you numbskulls, you complete dumbass. I was right here the whole time, but none of you could find me, ha ha ha. Do your eyes grow on your asses? Ha ha ha. Ling Chen's wild laughing and condescending words were sent into the ears of all of the surrounding Japanese players, and were also heard by players all around the world. After the light from Moon Flare disappeared, there were even more corpses on the ground, but Ling Tian was still nowhere to be seen. Wah 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 wah. Yamamoto Michio roared like a furious beast as he shrieked, "Search! Search for Ling Tian! Anyone who is hiding their name or is wearing a mask, or looks similar to Ling Tian must die. Kill! Kill!" Ling Chen's appearance, as well as his vicious ridiculing, sent the Japanese players over the edge. The scene that was just calming down once again exploded into madness. Ling Chen once again walked into his living room and casually sat on the sofa as he watched the broadcast from Japan with glee. What's more, they didn't even know that Ling Tian, who they were so desperately trying to find, was comfortably lazing on his sofa as he watched their amusing performance. The situation began to spiral more and more out of control. No one expected that such a thing would happen. If the Japanese players kept even a bit of their rationality, things would not have come to this. However, because Ling Tian had utterly stepped all over their dignity and pride, the sense of humiliation and fury that they felt made them lose control. In addition, after Ling Chen had just fanned the flames, they again became like savage beasts who wanted to tear Ling Tian into shreds. As time passed, the Japanese players once again began to calm down. Countless Japanese players had been killed, and even more had been taken away by the city guards. However, seeing that Ling Tian still had not been found, many of the Japanese players started to leave. At this moment, Ling Chen once again appeared. Just like the previous time, he immediately activated Moon Flare as he uproariously laughed, "Ha ha ha, you trash have killed so many of your own comrades, but you haven't even touched a hair on my body yet. Even a group of dogs would be better than the lot of you. Even if you had millions of players, you still wouldn't be able to catch me, ha ha ha. By the way, I might as well tell you, in China, we have an item that lets us temporarily change our names. I bet you idiots haven't heard of it before, ha ha ha." The Japanese players had finally suppressed their rage and indignation and were about to make the right decision in leaving. However, hearing this, they once again became completely infuriated, and roared out. Once the blinding light disappeared, there were more corpses on the ground, but they still could not see Ling Tian. This time, he had even given them a misdirection, causing them to believe that he had always been here, but it was just that they couldn't find him, and it was because he had used an item to temporarily change his name. No one knew what Ling Tian looked like. As such, if he took off his mask and even changed his name, it was no wonder that they couldn't find him. An item that allows you to temporarily change your name? Chiu Feng, have you heard of such a thing before? Yun Feng thought hard, but he couldn't think of such an item. In virtual games, once one's in-game name was chosen, it couldn't be changed. This was something known by everyone. I haven't heard of it before, but for Ling Tian to be able to obtain a Heaven's End grade weapon and Heaven's End grade pet before he even hit LV 30, I don't think it's impossible for him to obtain such a thing. An item that can temporarily change one's name probably exists, which is why they couldn't find Ling Tian after all that time. Xiao Qiufeng replied. None of the players considered the possibility that while the Japanese players were looking for Ling Tian, he was actually offline. No matter how hard they searched, they wouldn't be able to find him, no matter what. However, there was a reason why no one had realized this. In order to log off, a person had to be in a free state, meaning that they could not be in battle or have aggro drawn to them. When Ling Tian had first disappeared, he had been surrounded by countless enemies, with all of them locked on to him. If he wanted to log off, he would have to escape from the aggro range of all of the players. The blinding light only lasted for around 5 seconds, and it would be impossible for him to get out of their aggro range in just 5 seconds. If it was a day ago, Ling Tian would not have been able to do such a thing. However, when Ling Chen had leveled up to LV30, he had received a new skill from his Feng Chen sect profession, Vanishing Shadow. Vanishing Shadow allowed him to directly conceal himself, and it wasn't any normal concealment. According to the description, even a god would not be able to discover him. This meant that when he activated Vanishing Shadow, not only did his body turn invisible, but his aura completely disappeared as well. It was impossible for anyone to detect him with any of their senses, as if he had suddenly vanished. As such, any aggro locked onto him naturally disappeared as well. After activating Vanishing Shadow and losing the aggro of the players, he simply logged off. It was because of this skill that Ling Chen could toy around with the Japanese players like this. At this moment, Yamamoto Michio loudly yelled out, "Everyone listen. No one move." Unsetting Sun players, lock down the area within 100 meters of where the voice came from. Don't let anyone leave. From when Ling Tian spoke, to when the silver light disappeared, only about 1 second had passed. It was impossible for Ling Tian to move more than 50 meters in a single second. That meant that Ling Tian was definitely still within a 100-meter diameter of where he had spoken from. The Unsetting Sun players immediately moved into action, forming a human barricade around the area where the voice had come from. The Japanese players inside that area also cooperated by not moving, hoping that Ling Tian would be quickly found. Looking at the players inside the human barricade, Yamamoto Michio's gaze became more and more savage. After confirming that no one could get in or out of that area, he waved his hand, shouting, "Archers, get ready. Kill everyone inside that barricade. Those of you who are innocent, after we kill Ling Tian, the Unsetting Sun will generously compensate you. Start attacking." The archers, who had been prepared since a long time ago, aimed their arrows towards the players within the encirclement. Because of how closely they were all standing, there were more than 2,000 people in that area. In order to force Ling Tian out, Yamamoto Michio was willing to kill all 2,000 of these people. This showed just how desperate they were to kill Ling Tian, and the lack of options that they had. The surrounded players all revealed an expression of fear and dismay, but not a single person dared to try to escape. After all, trying to escape in this situation would just result in them being attacked even more. Everyone was surprised by Yamamoto Michio's cruel decision, but no one had the opportunity to respond before countless arrows descended towards the innocent Japanese players. They began to collapse one after another amidst pitiful screams. Pfft! Ling Chen spat out the tea in his mouth as he stared at the screen in shock. He had never thought that his misdirection would be so successful and have such an effect. In order to find him, these Japanese people were mass-killing their own comrades, a whole 2,000 people at once. Even with his low opinion of Japan, Ling Chen didn't think that they would do such a thing. However, he had forgotten just how much suffering and humiliation he had caused them, driving them to commit this atrocity. The miserable screams in the Sunrise City Central Square thundered to the sky, shocking countless players around the world. No one expected that the Japanese players would do such a vicious thing in order to get rid of Ling Tian. Arrows continuously whistled through the air, and the area surrounded by the archers gradually shrank. Soon, all of the players within the encirclement were dead, and not a single one had escaped. Despite this, Ling Chen was still not found. Could it be that Ling Chen had already been killed, or? The central square was incredibly quiet, and Yamamoto Michio's expression continuously changed. He had a vicious and cruel personality, but that decision was still quite extreme. After calming down a bit, he started to feel some regret. After all, what he just ordered could destroy his reputation. However, it wouldn't be too bad if they could force Ling Chen out or kill him, but what was worrying was that Ling Chen had still not appeared. He didn't naively believe that Ling Chen had been killed by the countless arrows, but within that area, there was not a single person alive. Yamamoto Michio sharply breathed in. Could this Ling Chen be a ghost? That area had been tightly locked down, and not a single person had escaped. How was it possible that he was not there? If he hadn't died from the arrows, then, all 2,000 of those players would have died for nothing. The consequences would be unimaginable. Ling Chen has been killed. Let's go. Yamamoto Michio gritted his teeth and yelled out. He flicked his wrist, and quickly began to walk out of the central square as he desperately prayed. Ling Chen. You definitely died just then. Please be dead. Ha ha ha, how exciting. How brilliant. Looks like coming to Japan to see this amazing show was worth it, ha ha ha. Yamamoto Michio's body froze, and he almost spat out blood. That's right, it was once again Ling Chen's voice. This proved that he was still alive. Those 2,000 players who were just killed had all become utter jokes. Hearing Ling Chen's voice, Yamamoto Michio's entire body trembled. He abruptly whipped around, but couldn't see Ling Chen. This time, Ling Chen hadn't used Moon Flare when he appeared. Rather, he activated Vanishing Shadow, so everyone could hear him, yet could not see him. Concealment? Could it be that they couldn't find him because of his concealment skill? Impossible. How was this possible? How could a concealment skill last for such a long period of time? This would be impossible even for a top assassin. The first time Ling Chen appeared, they had been furious. The second time, they had gone berserk. The third time, they had lost all sense of reason. The fourth time, the Japanese players, who had been toyed around with until they wished they were dead, all felt fear course throughout their bodies. Even the dumbest person among them realized that they had been led by the nose by Ling Chen the entire time. This time, none of the Japanese players randomly attacked. Yamamoto Michio looked around, and tried to find where Ling Chen was, while shouting, Ling Chen. Come out if you're a man. Just as Yamamoto Michio yelled out, Ling Chen appeared 10 meters away from him. He looked at Yamamoto Michio and did not even try to hide the condescension in his voice. Hee hee, alright, I'm here now. What are you going to do, though? Oh right, even though your third-ranked expert was scared into pissing himself and ran off like a dog, and your top-ranked expert willingly acted like a sheep in order to become a pet, you still have a second-ranked player. I wonder whether that person will be as much of a joke as those other two. You. Yamamoto Michio was so angry that it felt as if he was going to suffer internal injuries. He pointed at Ling Chen as he hoarsely roared, everyone attack. Kill him. Whoever kills him will receive 10 million gold. Holy crap, 10 million gold. Hearing the reward for killing Ling Chen, some players almost fainted. Let alone anyone else, even Ling Chen felt like stabbing himself. No one could resist this sort of temptation. The Unsetting Sun players, as well as all of the other surviving players, cast away the fear they felt towards Ling Chen, and sprinted towards him with the prospect of riches. Whoosh! A silver light swept out, but it was not the nightmarish light of the moon flare. It was only a single ray of light, and pierced through Yamamoto Michio's body. Ling Chen, who was originally standing in front of Yamamoto Michio, now stood behind him. Yamamoto Michio's eyes widened, and he fell to the ground. He remembered that even the powerful Blade Emperor had been taken down by this attack in a single blow. Now, he realized how Yamazaki Jinichi had been killed by Ling Chen so effortlessly. The attacks from Ling Chen were like a streak of lightning, and could not be avoided using human reflexes. Let alone Yamazaki Jinichi, even the legendary player Eve might not be able to avoid such an attack. Yamamoto Michio's body quickly disappeared, then reappeared at the revival point nearby. His face darkened as he yelled, "Don't worry about me. Destroy Ling Chen at all costs." After suffering so much, Ling Chen had finally shown himself. How could they let this opportunity go? Right now, they could only pray that the nightmarish light would not appear. After insta-killing Yamamoto Michio, Ling Chen stood his ground with the Great Ravager pointed to the left and the Twilight Spear pointed to the right. He looked completely relaxed, as if he was waiting for the Japanese players to come near. There were so many Japanese players present that describing the scene as an ocean of people would be an understatement. They all locked on to where Ling Chen was, and charged over with their weapons in hand. As they closed in, Ling Chen's expression slightly changed, and the lunar scourge burst out with a faint silver light. It was so faint that it almost wasn't visible, but it instantly enveloped an area of 60 meters around Ling Chen. In the back, many archers and magicians had stepped into attack range. They stopped walking and lifted up their bows or staffs, however, not a single arrow was released or spell cast. All of the archers and magicians' eyes widened in complete confusion. Bastards! Did you all die? Hurry up and attack. If everyone attacks even once, it'll be enough to make Ling Chen die hundreds of times over. Against Ling Chen, archers and magicians were the best options. According to their information, Ling Chen was much too powerful in melee battles, so the melee players were only cannon fodder to him. They didn't even qualify to be meat shields in front of Ling Chen. However, after the Unsetting Sun's elite archers and magicians got into position, all of them stood there without releasing a single attack. By now, countless players of the melee professions had arrived in front of Ling Chen. And yet, Ling Chen did not use Moon Flare. The instant Ling Chen disappeared into the crowd, the Chinese players all cried out in shock. Anyone would be completely buried in such a crowd, and it would be impossible to even resist. The Chinese players were all incredibly worried, but suddenly looked at each other in surprise. The countless melee profession players raised their weapons, and prepared to strike at Ling Chen. There were swords, knives, daggers, axes, and heavy weapons. However, the players were not able to do anything else apart from raise their weapons. After quite a while, not a single weapon descended, which caused all of the Japanese players to look around in bewilderment. It almost looked like a scene from a movie where a person was about to attack someone, but suddenly stopped because they realized that that person was a long-lost parent. The players who were spectating were absolutely confused, and Yamamoto Michio almost exploded from anger. Only the players who were affected knew what was going on. The reason they did not attack was very simple, but very strange. It was as if they had forgotten how to use the skills that they were incredibly familiar with. No matter if it was the archers, magicians, or melee professions, all of them held their weapons in the air, yet none of them could remember how to cast their skills. Ling Chen laughed. The effects of this moon grief far surpassed what he had expected. Seeing the bloodthirsty Japanese players unable to even attack, and looking utterly flabbergasted, he simply couldn't help but laugh out loud. Of course, he was not affected by moon grief. Boom! From the middle of the ocean of players came miserable cries. Under Ling Chen's four corners star formation, all of the players around him were blasted through the air. The max level four corners star formation had a range of 15 meters, and was extremely powerful. In just one hit, more than 130 players had been blown away. With the players gathered so densely, insta-killing these 130 or so players was not the end. As they flew, they would also crash into the players behind them who were charging forwards, which threw the Japanese players into chaos. Players stepped on and fell over each other, and crashed to the ground. The Japanese players, who were already in shock from not being able to use their skills, began to panic even more. Once again, the scene descended into complete and utter chaos. As soon as he attacked, the morale of the Japanese players was completely crushed. Ling Chen coldly laughed and charged towards the players in front of him. Moon Grief's effects lasted 10 seconds, which was double that of Moon Shadows and Moon Flares. Within those 10 seconds, the players within 60 meters of him couldn't use any skills. This made it as if their hands and feet were tied together, and even though there were many of them, they couldn't harm Ling Chen in the slightest. After charging into the crowd of players, the Great Ravager and Twilight Spear continuously danced around, and decimated the players around Ling Chen. Bang! Bang! The sounds from Ling Chen's weapons were not those of normal clangs, but deafening bangs and booms. 2 Ling Tian bursts insta-killed and sent more than 20 Japanese players flying. Ling Chen was as fast as lightning, and before the players around them could respond, he had already charged even further into the crowd, sweeping out with Ling Tian bursts. The max-level Ling Tian burst could now clear out all of the players in a 7-meter area, and with 2 weapons, this resulted in there always being a 14-meter space around Ling Chen devoid of enemies. Every time he attacked, he would hit 20 to 30 targets. With attacks that could even insta-kill Japan's top player, there was no one who could survive even a single attack from him. On the other hand, Ling Chen didn't even bother to look at the Japanese players who attacked him. From when he started to attack with the Great Ravager and Twilight Spear, there was not a single melee profession player who could get close enough to even attack. With his weapons in both hands continuously cutting down enemies, there had always been a large area of free space around him. Whenever this area was half filled, it would once again be cleared out. The waves of red damaged figures caused the surrounding players to inhale sharply, and some even forgot to attack in their shock. In the distance, the archers and magicians stood dumbly, and tried to cast their skills and spells. In the end, they gave up, and decided to use normal attacks. However, the incredibly weak arrows that glanced Ling Chen's body only brought about more fear and despair. -1, miss. Putting aside all of his other equipment, Ling Chen's entire body was covered by the celestial grade armor that he had obtained from the mountain giant, Titan's Embrace. With this piece of armor, he had 420 defense, which simply couldn't be broken through by most players' normal attacks. Before, Ling Chen had used some sort of incredibly perverse skill to toy around with the Japanese players. However, back then, he had used some sort of a trickery. Apart from Ling Chen himself, no one knew what had happened. However, this time, Ling Chen had used his own power to directly fight against this incredible army of Japanese players. Ling Tian's skills are way too overpowered. He has such a large attack radius, and they don't have any cooldown times. How can such skills exist? A player from the south shouted out. In actuality, though the max-level Ling Tian burst was powerful, but it wasn't that overpowered. However, because Ling Chen could use 2 weapons, as well as use this skill through both weapons, the situation became vastly different. To be able to repeatedly attack in front of and behind him with a skill that should have a long cooldown time but didn't, Ling Chen's attacks were simply terrifying. My god, a spear and a double-handed sword, this is way too inconceivable. Who would have thought that the East had such a powerful profession? This is China's Ling Tian. Holy crap, this guy's even scarier than what the legend said. He's probably at the same level as Eve. He's actually taking on an entire country by himself. My heart's beating so quickly from watching this incredible scene. So it turns out that apart from Eve, the East has such a powerful player. China's Ling Tian, I don't think I'll be able to forget his name. Because of him, China's position in the world has completely changed. My god, this guy's a superhuman like Eve. Has another legend-level player who can contend with Eve appeared? Just as Xiao Qiufeng had expected, when Ling Chen didn't fall despite being in such a hopeless situation, he completely shocked the entire world. Players all over the world firmly remembered the name Ling Tian in their minds. However, only Ling Chen knew why he had not fallen despite being surrounded by such a multitude of enemy players. That was because of the lunar skill that made his enemies forget their skills: Moon Grief. Moon Shadow, Moon Flare, Moon Grief, every lunar skill of the Lunar Scourge was incredibly powerful, even miraculous. You bastards! Trash! Did you all die? Why aren't you attacking? Hurry up and attack. Use your goddamn skills. The magicians all stood there in a daze, and the archers were all using their normal attacks. If it wasn't because Yamamoto Michio had a fairly strong heart, he would have coughed up 100 mouthfuls of blood. He didn't know what was going on, but what he saw completely infuriated him. It wasn't that Ling Tian was too overpowered, but that his people were going easy on him. Every single one of them. 10 seconds passed, and Moon Grief's effects ended, which meant that Ling Chen could no longer continue to attack so recklessly. No matter how much HP and defense he had, he wouldn't be able to take a multitude of long-ranged attacks. Vanishing Shadow had a 100 seconds cooldown time, and there was still about 60 seconds until he could use it again. However, he didn't panic. Since he decided to come out and fight with them in the open, he definitely had a plan. If he wanted to get out of this situation alive, he would have to use all of his skills and ingenuity. Broken Shadow. As soon as Broken Shadow was activated, Ling Chen's movement speed and evasion increased by 9 times. He smirked and rushed forwards. Whoosh! There was only a gust of wind, and suddenly Ling Tian disappeared from everyone's vision. The players who were closest to him looked around in shock, and players all over the world gasped in surprise. The feed of the screen moved around, and looked for Ling Tian. When it finally found him, all they saw was a blur that was fast as lightning. The Japanese players were once again sent into mass confusion. Fast, too fast. The speed at which he was traveling was something that people couldn't even imagine. Within the Fengchen technique, Ling Chen already had extremely high movement speed. Now that it had been increased by 9 times, his movement speed broke past 1,500, a number that could scare most players to death. The densely gathered crowd could do nothing to stop Ling Chen from flashing about. Wherever he went, he would leave behind a massive gust of wind, as well as many corpses. The feed of the screen zoomed out continuously. The incredibly fast blur that was charging around within the dense crowd was particularly striking. On the screen, it looked like Ling Tian was an incredibly fast flying sword that pierced through groups of Japanese players, none of whom could stop him. Normally, with such a massive crowd, no matter how fast one moved, they would be stopped by the sheer numbers of the players. However, Ling Chen's speed didn't seem to be affected in the slightest, and he did not pause at all. He was like an extremely nimble and slippery loach. The Japanese players' ranks were in complete disarray, and screams filled the air. In such a short period of time, the number of players who had died under Ling Tian's hands exceeded 500. Ling Tian's speed first shocked them, then caused them to cower in fear, and ultimately caused them to give up in despair. In this state, no matter how many people they had, they wouldn't be able to stop him. All they could do was pray that the effects would quickly end. Of course, powerful skills always had their limits. Currently, Ling Tian could only use Broken Shadow 3 times per day, for 20 seconds each time. After 20 seconds passed, Ling Chen used his second Broken Shadow of the day. He continued to rush around within the crowd, killing the Japanese players as they helplessly wailed. After screaming and yelling from afar, Yamamoto Michio's voice had already become hoarse. However, no matter how much he yelled, there was simply no one who could stop Ling Chen. By now, he, and most of the Japanese players, only had regret in their hearts. they completely regretted angering this Ling Chen. They would much rather believe that China's #1 player wasn't a player, but a demon. After the second broken shadow expired, Ling Chen didn't hesitate to use his third, and final, one. Everything was tipped in his favor, but he clearly knew that once he was surrounded by Japanese players without any way to escape, it would be incredibly dangerous for him. His attacks were simple: Ling Chen burst after Ling Chen burst. Every time he would kill at least 10 people, sometimes up to even 30. This was because the players were all standing together quite closely. Finally, the Japanese players became completely terrified of him. Even an incredibly powerful boss wouldn't make them feel so powerless, and yet this Ling Chen, they were dying in droves, but they couldn't even touch his clothes. It was as if they were there just to be killed. The players who respawned at the revival point stood there, unwilling to go back into the fight. With their morale crushed, the Japanese players all began to retreat and lower their weapons. They fearfully looked around, worried that Ling Chen would suddenly appear before them and destroy them. After the third broken shadow ended, Vanishing Shadow's cooldown time had expired. Ling Chen stopped attacking, and before the Japanese players realized what was happening, the piercing light that they were extremely familiar with and deeply feared shone out from Ling Tian's body. Retreat! Everyone retreat! Yamamoto Michio squeezed his eyes closed and roared out the order to retreat. When the silver light that struck fear into all of their hearts appeared again, Yamamoto Michio's last bit of hope was extinguished, and he lost his will to fight this terrifying and undefeatable enemy. Seeing him flee, the rest of the Japanese players had no reason to stay and continue to fight, and also fled in terror. All they wanted was to run as far away as possible. After Moon Flare disappeared, Ling Chen stood all by himself in the center of the Sunrise City Central Square. There was not a single Japanese player near him. This was the central position in the East Ocean continent's Sunrise City. And yet, only a Chinese player stood there, with countless Japanese players desperately fleeing from him. This scene caused countless players around the world to clearly hear the sound of their hearts thumping. On the very first day of entering the East Ocean continent, Ling Tian's actions shocked the entire world. This caused players to elevate his name to the same level as Eve's. Looking at the collapse of the Japanese army, Ling Chen coldly smiled. If it wasn't for the Japanese players trying to make trouble for him, he wouldn't have bothered to deal with them. He came to the East Ocean continent to look for the Lunar Scourge's orbs, not to waste time on these people. He knew what sort of uproar his actions would cause, but he didn't hold back at all. Instead, he actually went out of his way to do some of these things. He purposely increased his fame and standing, as well as struck fear into certain people. What he had done was enough. Ling Chen looked around at the Japanese players, took out a spatial orb and left the Sunrise City. He appeared at the first place that he had arrived at in the East Ocean continent, called out his mount, and sped towards the north. Ling Chen didn't have any reason or interest to stay in the Sunrise City. As for what the consequences of what he just did were, he simply didn't care. He cared even less about that third-ranked expert and top-ranked expert who he had humiliated. His goal was very clear: the Celestial Cherry Valley. According to the old shopkeeper, only the Celestial Cherry Valley was filled with snow and had cherry blossoms all year round. That was the only place that fit the description of Suer gave. Ling Chen put on some ordinary-looking equipment as well as a mask and continued to head north. He didn't worry at all that anyone would recognize him. And even if he was recognized, it didn't matter. Currently, the Japanese players were absolutely terrified of him. If they saw and recognized him, they would probably immediately turn and run. Because there were many training spots near the Sunrise City, Ling Chen saw many Japanese different players along the way. The key training spots were all densely packed. After an hour, the number of players he saw greatly decreased, and soon, he couldn't see a single player around. Ling Chen felt a bit suspicious and took out the East Ocean continent map. He was still to the west of the Sunrise City, about 5 or 6 kilometers away, and had not yet passed the northernmost point of the Sunrise City. Logically, there should be many players here, but there was not a single player in sight. Ling Chen was curious, but continued onwards. Soon, he realized why this was. In front of him was row upon row of guards carrying weapons. Most of them wore silver armor, with a few wearing gold armor. The color of their armor signified that they were quite important. Looking around, there were about 400 of these guards who were facing in all 4 directions in a standard battle formation. At the center of the formation, behind all of the guards, was a tall stone platform. On top of the stone platform was a ferocious and strange-looking statue. Ling Chen stared at it for a while, but couldn't tell what it was. There was an inconspicuous door on the side of the stone platform. However, there seemed to be a black light swirling around it, as if some power had sealed the door. City Guard Restricted Area. Anyone without permission is forbidden to enter. Leave immediately. Just as Ling Chen walked closer, 3 of the guards took a step forwards and shouted in unison. At the same time, the other guards all abruptly turned to stare at him with incredibly sharp and piercing stares. Ling Chen was sure that if he took another step forward, he would immediately be stabbed by tens of weapons. These were probably peak-level guards who were all LV-100. The silver-armored guards were 3-star elites and gold-armored guards were Lord-grade bosses. This sort of formation was extremely extravagant, and almost seemed excessive for guarding such a stone platform. It was obvious that the stone platform was something important. Ling Chen did not say anything as he turned and left. After walking 10 steps away, the pressure that had been locked onto him disappeared. After backtracking a bit and turning a corner, Ling Chen stopped walking. Should he force his way in to have a look? Having such a formation to defend this stone platform evoked Ling Chen's curiosity. If it was a normal player facing these guards, they would treat them with utmost respect and would not even think about forcing their way through, because that would be suicide. Evidently, Ling Chen was not a normal player. The more dangerous something was, the more he wanted to try it. Of course, the prerequisite was that there was a possibility of success. Plus, once his curiosity was piqued, there would be an itch in his heart that he simply had to quell. 5 seconds later, Ling Chen made his decision. He gently breathed in, and his body disappeared. With Vanishing Shadow activated, Ling Chen ran forwards, back to where the guards were. Even when he ran past them, they did not react at all. The Feng Chen Sect's concealment technique was not just any normal concealment technique. Let alone these high-leveled guards, even a group of celestial-grade guards would not be able to detect him. Vanishing Shadow only lasted for 20 seconds, so Ling Chen sprinted forwards as fast as he could. Very soon, he reached the stone platform that the guards were guarding. The stone platform was 3 meters tall, and the statue on top of it was gigantic. Ling Chen glanced at the statue before looking at the door covered with black light. It didn't seem like it was possible to pass through this door. This door was evidently sealed by some sort of energy, so there were 2 possibilities if he entered. The first was that he would be attacked by the powerful energy. However, he wasn't afraid, as he had the evil god's mask. The other possibility was that it would trigger some sort of alarm. No matter which possibility it was, the guards would be alerted, who would furiously attack him. There were still 5 seconds left of Vanishing Shadow. Ling Chen became resolute and charged into the black light, preparing him for all sorts of possibilities. However, just as he was 1 step away from the door, the lunar scourge flashed with silver light. Instantly, the black light chaotically rippled, then disappeared as if it had evaporated. This scene caused Ling Chen to think back to when he had rescued Shi Ling. The lunar scourge's light had also quickly dispelled the energy that looked like black threads. However, he didn't have time to think as he quickly charged in. After he entered, the black light once again reappeared, covering the door. The 400 guards continued to look forwards, with not a single one of them detecting what had just happened. After passing through the door, Vanishing Shadow's effects ended. Ling Chen couldn't help but breathe out in relief and marvel at how close it could have been. There was no sound from outside, which meant that the guards did not realize what had happened. Ling Chen quickly looked around him. There was nothing under the stone platform, and there was only a flight of stone steps leading downwards. Xiao Hui, come out. In this sort of special area, calling out Xiao Hui was a must. With Xiao Hui leading the way, Ling Chen gently walked down the stone steps, trying not to make any noise. He was taking a huge risk to come to this mysterious place. He hoped that the rewards would be worth it. As the saying went, fortune favors the bold. The flight of stone steps went on for an unexpectedly long time. After walking for a while, Ling Chen finally stepped on flat ground that was slightly damp. Surprisingly, they were probably 100 meters under the ground. Ling Chen lifted his right wrist, allowing the lunar scourge to release a faint silver light. With the faint light, he saw a fairly spacious passageway. It was about 30 to 40 meters in width, and was about 20 to 30 meters high. Ling Chen couldn't help but worry if this place was going to collapse at any moment. There was such a passageway so deep under the ground, and there were so many guards protecting it. What sort of place was this? Could it be an important prison? Xiao Hui didn't raise any alarms, and continued to walk ahead, so Ling Chen followed him. The dirt was fairly soft and damp, and there was a rotten smell in the stale air. Ling Chen looked around warily and softly walked forwards. He originally thought that the passageway would be quite short, as they were so far underneath the ground. However, the deeper they went, the more shocked he became. The length of this passageway greatly exceeded what he had expected. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Xiao Hui continued to walk. 30 minutes. 40 minutes. After an hour, Ling Chen still had not reached the end of the passageway. In fact, he couldn't tell if the end was even near. Over this period of time, he had walked at least 5 kilometers. What was going on? Digging such a wide and long passageway so far under the ground, this was an incredible feat. At least, humans wouldn't be able to accomplish such a thing. As Ling Chen became more and more shocked, a gray light suddenly flashed in the darkness. The source of the light was Xiao Hui's horn. Xiao Hui had discovered something. This sort of reaction indicated that there was some sort of treasure nearby. Xiao Hui paused, and became excited, and Ling Chen's spirits were also lifted. The end of the passageway was near, and there would be treasure waiting for him there. After walking for another kilometer, Xiao Hui stopped walking, and his fur stood on end. This reaction told Ling Chen that not only was there treasure ahead, but some sort of danger. It seemed that Xiao Hui didn't let out any howls because he didn't want to alert the source of the danger of their presence. With the lunar scourge and the Fengchen sect skills, as well as the evil god's mask, Ling Chen's survivability was incredible. Xiao Hui's warning did not make him feel like retreating at all. He continued onwards, but walked even softer, and his footsteps barely made any noise. Whoosh, 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 the sounds became clearer and clearer as Ling Chen walked, and his mind became incredibly alert. Soon, he found that this noise seemed to be a giant beast's breathing or snoring. When he came closer, the sound became as loud as thunder. Finally, Ling Chen exited the passageway and stepped into an extremely vast space. In the dim lighting, he saw a gigantic figure. Its entire body was black, and seemed to have a metallic tint that reflected the dim light. Its head was facing Ling Chen, who could see its lizard-like mouth. At the front of its mouth were 2 incredibly sharp teeth sticking out, both of which were about half a meter long. On its head was a black horn that was about 2 meters long, and on its back there were 2 black, bat-like wings that were hanging down naturally. Similarly, its abdominal area was also jet black. Its claws, which were half covered by its body, had nails that looked like steel hooks, and behind it, there was a conical tail that was at least 10 meters long. At the moment, it seemed to be sleeping, but its powerful snores were almost deafening. What was this thing? Although it was asleep, it gave off a pressure that made it difficult for Ling Chen to breathe. To be able to emit a pressure like that while only sleeping. This monster was definitely incredibly powerful. Ling Chen held his breath, and directed Xiao Hui to look at its information. Xiao Hui's horn flashed, and some incomplete information about this gigantic creature appeared in Ling Chen's mind. Evil black dragon, type, ancient beast, grade, mysterious god, level, one of the 10 ancient beasts of the East Ocean continent. It is incredibly powerful and loves to kill, and created countless catastrophes in the East Ocean continent. It was gravely injured by the Moon God clan, and only submitted out of fear of death. It was ordered by the Cherry Blossom God representative to become the guardian beast of Sunrise City, and to stay and protect Sunrise City's city lifeline. Passive abilities? Attack skills? Ultimate skill? Weaknesses? Goddamn, an ancient beast. Ling Chen gulped. This massive creature in front of him was a super boss of the same grade as Tao Tai. A main city's guardian beast. An existence that was inferior only to Saint Destroyer creatures. No wonder why it could release such a pressure even while it was sleeping. However, to force a vicious beast to become a guardian beast, did they not fear it turning on them one day? Or was the Moon God clan really that powerful? Now that he knew more about this gigantic black creature, Ling Chen became even more cautious, and did not dare to breathe loudly. But wait, protect the Sunrise City's city lifeline? City lifeline? Ling Chen looked up towards the gigantic pillar behind the evil black dragon. Could it be that that pillar was the Sunrise City's city lifeline? This was where it was held? City lifelines were things that determined the existence of main cities. In Mystic Moon, the elemental essence was quite dense, and was at least 10 times denser than on Earth. The density and high activity of the elemental essence in Mystic Moon resulted in creatures in Mystic Moon being far more powerful than creatures on Earth, and had a much longer lifespan. However, there were downsides to this, such as frequent natural disasters like cyclones, floods, bushfires, tornadoes, thunderstorms, earthquakes. No matter if it was the frequency or severity, they were 10 times worse than on Earth as well. Humans simply couldn't resist nature, and because of how important main cities and royal cities were, humans simply couldn't allow them to be continuously destroyed. As such, every sizable city had a city lifeline, whether it was main cities or royal cities. City lifelines stabilized the elemental essence around a city. More directly, they absorbed the excess elemental essence in order to prevent natural disasters from occurring. Nevertheless, not only could it absorb elemental essence, but could not dispose of it. That meant that if the elemental essence stored in the city lifeline suddenly exploded out, the city would be completely and utterly destroyed. As such, a city had to have a city lifeline, and the city lifeline had to be so powerful that it could not be destroyed. In the Mystic Moon world, all of the main cities and royal cities' city lifelines were imbued with the Moon God's power, making them almost indestructible. At the same time, there would always be powerful guards protecting the city lifeline. Some were human, some were beasts, and some Moon God representatives personally watched over it. City lifelines would also be hidden in extremely secretive places with powerful defense mechanisms, and no creatures would be allowed near them. Ling Chen never thought that the place he had entered out of curiosity actually contained the Sunrise City's city lifeline. Looking at the massive pillar behind the evil black dragon, a wicked expression appeared on Ling Chen's face. The Sunrise City had probably been around for a long time, so the amount of elemental essence absorbed within it was probably quite terrifying. If he could destroy this city lifeline, that would be simply glorious. Of course, all he could do was think about it. If the city lifeline could be destroyed so easily, it would have been impossible for all of the main cities and royal cities to remain standing for so long. Even if he hit the pillar for 100 years, he might not be able to damage it in the slightest. And this was without taking into account an ancient beast that was just as powerful and terrifying as Tao Tai. Xiao Hui stood there, unwilling to move forwards. Evidently, the sense of danger that came from the evil black dragon was far too great. His horn continued to shine, and began to shine even brighter. This meant that Xiao Hui was currently less than 50 meters away from the treasure. Ling Chen looked around, and apart from the evil black dragon and the pillar, there was nothing else. Where was the treasure that Xiao Hui had detected? Could it be behind the evil black dragon or some place that he couldn't see? Just as Ling Chen was about to walk forwards, Qiyu suddenly spoke, "Little master, where are we?" "Underneath the Sunrise City. In front of us is the city lifeline, as well as its guardian beast, the evil black dragon," Ling Chen quickly replied. Hearing Qiyu's voice, she probably just woke up, and didn't know what was happening. "City lifeline?" Qiyu asked in shock, before softly saying, "Could it be that you found the place where Su'er said an orb would be?" "Not yet." Ling Chen replied, surprised that Qiyu had asked such a thing. "You haven't? But I can feel that there's an orb here, and it's very close by. If I'm not wrong, it should be the strongest one of the 12 orbs." "What?" Ling Chen stood in shock for a moment, and almost yelled out. "There was a god orb here. I'm certain that it's a god orb, and it's so strong that it's close to being a saint orb." "Okay." Ling Chen enthusiastically replied, and held his breath, calming himself down. Gemini orb, Sagittarius orb, Cancer orb, Pisces orb, Virgo orb, all of them were extremely overpowered and had greatly increased his power. And now, Qiyu had said that the strongest god orb was nearby. It was even stronger than the ones he had obtained so far. What sort of amazing stats would it have? "Xiao Hui, hurry and find it." The treasure that Xiao Hui detected was definitely the strongest god orb. After receiving Ling Chen's orders, Xiao Hui bravely started to softly walk forwards. Evidently, he knew the consequences of being too loud. Ling Chen carefully followed behind Xiao Hui, and scanned the area around him while walking incredibly softly. His ability to control his footsteps and aura was peerless, and after 10 or so steps, he and Xiao Hui had arrived in front of the evil black dragon, about 5 meters away from its head. After stopping for a few moments, Xiao Hui continued to walk around the evil black dragon's body, then stopped next to its left claw. His gem-like eyes fixedly stared at its left claw. The strongest god orb was under the evil black dragon's claw. The evil black dragon's left claw was not flat against the ground, but instead in a half-gripping state. From the gaps between the claws, Ling Chen could see an orb shining with a silver light. Its size and the light it emanated, as well as the reaction from the lunar scourge, confirmed that it was definitely a god orb. It seemed that some things could not be found no matter how hard one looked, and could only be found by chance. It was inconceivable that he would find a god orb here. Ling Chen's heart thumped excitedly, but he was immediately faced with a problem. From how the evil black dragon's claw was resting, it didn't seem like it was pressing down on the orb. Taking it out wouldn't be too difficult. Because its claw was so large, Ling Chen could stretch his arm between a gap. However, no matter how careful he was, he would probably awaken this evil black dragon, this terrifying ancient beast. Ling Chen thought in silence for a while before making up his mind. There was simply no other way apart from using his hand to pull it out. No matter what, he needed to obtain this god orb. Ling Chen called back Xiao Hui and lay on his belly, his head right next to its claw. He slowly stretched out his left arm through the gap. The instant his hand came into contact with the orb, the lunar scourge on his right hand shone with silver light. Moon Shadow activated, and froze everything apart from Ling Chen and the orb. Ling Chen acted incredibly quickly. As expected, it didn't require him to exert any strength to pull it out. If the orb was being pressed down on by the evil black dragon, with how heavy its body was, Ling Chen wouldn't have been able to pull it out even if he was twice as strong. Obtaining the god orb so easily simply didn't feel real. Ling Chen didn't have time to look at its stats, and he quickly threw it into his bag as he took out a spatial orb. He had to quickly leave here, otherwise when Moon Shadow's effects ended, the evil black dragon would probably wake up. If he was locked on to buy it, things would get out of hand. Ding, you are in a sealed region, spatial orb's energy cannot be used. Ling Chen.